Testing 1, 2, 3. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:30 and there's a quorum in the room, so I would invite you to take your seats so we can get started. Okay, we'll start with declarations of interest. Seeing none, confirmation of minutes 43 from November 20th, 2013. Carried? Thank you. Communications as listed on the agenda. Presentations, item number 1, there is a chair's update, so we will hold that and return to it. Item number 2, update from the General Manager, Transit Services. He too has an update, so that will be held and we'll return to it. And item number 3, Presto update. There is an update and we will be holding that item as well. Item number 4, status update, Transit Commission inquiries and motions for the period ending December 2nd, 2013. Received? Received? Thank you. Item number 5, fare control strategy. There is a presentation, so that item will be held and we will return to it. Item number 6, detours during Confederation line construction. Now, I just want to turn the floor over to Mr. O'Connor, the City Solicitor, for just a moment to explain what is on the agenda today and what we can speak about today and what is outside our jurisdiction to speak about. So, Mr. O'Connor, over to you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to try to speak directly into the microphone. I've got a little bit of laryngitis. We did send out a memo this past Friday, and I appreciate it was on a Friday afternoon, with regards to some procedural inquiries we had over this particular report. And we were very clear that in the clerk's office position is that you can discuss changes related to fleet acquisition strategy, but not specifically to the detour in particular along Scott Street, which I know has had some media play. And there were 3 specific reasons that I wanted to share with members of the Commission on that, Madam Chair. The first and most important one being that City Council, at its December 19, 2012 special meeting, approved the construction detours as part of the bid package for this particular rail line. And it included specific reference to the Scott Street detours. And I refer, Madam Chair, just very briefly to page 34 of that report, which set out, among other things, from 2016 to 2018, 2 of the 4 general traffic lanes on Scott Street and Albert from Holland Avenue to Empress Avenue will be converted to transit-only lanes. And then there's some more verbiage, and then later on in the report at page 41, Madam Chair, there's a reference under a section called West Section, where it says, impacts on OC Transpo buses will be minimized by creating an alternative west of BRT with dedicated bus lanes on a widened Scott and Albert Streets and temporary stop facilities on Scott and Albert Streets at Bayview Station and Booth. And then it goes on in greater detail. So, Madam Chair, in addition to that, we produced in the procedure memo for last Friday direction number 6, which was the specific remaining issues for this item, and you can see it's part of the direction there, which is with regards to the pedestrian and cycling safety review, which go back to Transportation Committee and then back to Council. So, first of all, it was within the jurisdiction of Council, and they took that jurisdiction, Madam Chair. Second off, there is no reconsideration or revisiting issues of Council by any standing committees or local boards. Secondly, Madam Chair, there was the division, dare I say it, of powers report that we produced earlier this year on June 12th of 2013, where we talked about the specific items that would be of an operational nature coming to the Transit Commission and those other ones that would be left with the Finance and Economic Development Committee. And as you can see in our report, we reviewed the fact that they would include such matters for the Transit Commission as wayfaring, branding, advertising standards, as well as provide direction on strategic asset plans, and we note fleet acquisition. So very clearly the issues of fleet acquisition lie with the Commission. We went on to point out that everything else is left on the Confederation line resides within FEDCRO's jurisdiction. And finally, Madam Chair, with regards to the report on the Transit Commission's agenda for today, public delegations, as always, are in order. However, as we've indicated, they would be limited to discussions of matters with regards to the fleet acquisition strategy, not revisiting the issue of the detours themselves. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you very much, Mr. O'Connor, for that clarification. With that said, we're going to hold item number 6. There is a fairly lengthy presentation, and there is a public delegation, but I will be adhering to the city solicitor's advice around the nature of the presentations and the public delegations. Item number 7, request for data about off-peak punctuality of specific OC Transpo routes. That item remains on the agenda. Okay, so we'll hold that and return to it. We'll go back now to item number 1, which is the chair's update. I do have a number of things that I want to address the Commission on this afternoon, starting with the food drive. I'm happy to report that the 29th annual OC Transpo Loblaw Christmas Food Drive has officially concluded and once again was a huge success. This morning, representatives from Loblaw and the Ottawa Food Bank joined Mayor Watson and I for the delivery of the last busload of food, marking the end of the 2013 OC Transpo Loblaw Annual Christmas Food Drive. I am thrilled to announce that Ottawa residents have collected over 103,000, to be specific, 103,112 food and non-perishable items and $21,679.68 in donations. This year marks an increase of 7,549 food and non-perishable items over last year, which will be distributed to help thousands of local families and individuals in need this holiday season. I would like to extend my gratitude to all Ottawa residents who contributed to this year's food drive. This includes city employees who collected food donations at various city facilities throughout the month of November, and it also includes the over 500 volunteers who generously gave their time this past Saturday to help collect food donations at 18 participating grocery stores in our community. The OC Transpo Loblaw Annual Christmas Food Drive has a long-standing tradition in our community. It's the largest food drive in the city of Ottawa, and since 1984, over 1.3 million kilograms of food have been collected. With every food item and every dollar donated, we are making a difference in the lives of Ottawa families and residents who need a little extra help this Christmas season. And I have to say, I dropped by some of the food drive activity on Saturday, and there were a lot of great volunteers working really hard, long hours on this food drive, and I just want to say a very special thank you to everyone who made this year such a success. Second item is that OC Transpo is committed to providing safe, reliable, and customer-focused transit service for all. I would like to take a moment this afternoon to address questions around safety and security at Billings and Blair stations that were recently reported in the media. Transit services play a significant role in providing a safe environment for riders who use our services. We are always monitoring and deploying special constable resources according to demand. I want to assure you that OC Transpo has increased patrols of plainclothes and uniformed transit special constables at these stations, and all special constables have been reminded to be visible throughout the entire transit system. OC Transpo and Ottawa Police Services work in close cooperation and partnership to ensure and enhance the safety and security of transit users and employees. OPS members, OC Transpo special constables, and bylaw services personnel participate in proactive joint enforcement operations throughout the year targeting illegal activity on transit vehicles and transit properties. OC Transpo will continue meeting regularly with community stakeholders and partners to continually improve upon existing safety measures so that all transit users can ride the transit system with confidence and a sense of personal safety and security. I am pleased to announce that once again this year, OC Transpo will be providing free New Year's Eve transit service starting at 8 p.m. on December 31st. OC Transpo routes will be operating on a reduced weekday schedule, so customers should check the holiday schedules before heading out. For the second year in a row, OC Transpo was able to provide free service earlier than in the past. This is thanks to the generous sponsorship from the Safer Roads Ottawa Ottawa program, the Canadian Automobile Association, and the Ottawa chapter of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Thanks to the tremendous support of our partners, OC Transpo is thrilled to be able to fulfill its tradition of bringing increased safety and responsibility to Ottawa streets on New Year's Eve. Finally, I'd like to provide you with an update on the Canadian Urban Transit Association conference I attended just last month in Calgary. In addition to participating in the conference, Mr. Manconi and I used the opportunity to learn more about Calgary's light rail transit system. We met with staff and visited operational facilities, including their training center, which includes a state-of-the-art simulator, and you can actually see me in the simulator. It's a very cool thing. If you can see the outside, is actually they put all sorts of things in the way. They put like a dog on the track, and it's very cool for training purposes. We were quite impressed with it. CUDA also launched their passenger charter program, which is a program focused on the customer. The program's objectives are centered upon the premise that investing in customer service can lead to increased ridership. It can also boost employee morale, and it can lead to high public approval. A passenger charter that clearly outlines promises to improve service quality demonstrates a commitment to improving the customer's experience. I would like to see OC Transpo launch our own passenger charter when our work plan permits. While at CUDA, I was also able to attend the Transit Board Members Committee meeting on November 24th. During that meeting, John Baudouin from TransLinks in Vancouver made a presentation to committee members on TransLinks policies regarding controversial advertising used on transit properties. The presentation was focused on a particular case regarding an ad placed by the Palestinian Awareness Coalition on TransLinks Canada line and on several of its buses. TransLinks has since adapted its policies on advertisement based on rulings made by the Supreme Court of Canada and follows guidelines established by the Canadian Code of Advertising Standards. I found the presentation both informative and very relevant to what we're doing here in Ottawa. TransLink's advice was insightful and will assist OC Transpo as we conduct our own review of our advertising policies. With that said, I'd like to conclude my verbal update by noting that our next Transit Commission meeting will be taking place on February the 19th in 2014. I want to take this opportunity to wish everyone on behalf of the Transit Commission a safe and happy holiday season and a very Merry Christmas. Received on my report? Mr. Manconi, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of Commission, I have three updates. In a moment, I'm going to be asking Richard Holder from the Rail Implementation Office to come up and talk about, we have a minor shutdown that we have to do for the O-Train to deal with some construction issues on the expansion project. Before we do that, the second item is safety and security. Just want to reinforce what the Chair said and also point out that I did issue a memo on December 3rd outlining the numerous initiatives and programs that we have underway, including our CCTV program, our Special Constable program, Night Stop, our 10-point safety plan, and so forth. If you need any additional information or have ideas or suggestions that you'd like us to pursue, please do not hesitate to reach out to my office. And lastly, Madam Chair, 2013 is coming to a close. This is our last Transit Commission. I just want to take a moment to thank you and every member of the Transit Commission. We've had a very productive year. I also want to thank the management team, the men and women of OC Transpo, the three union groups, and our customers who make OC Transpo a great operation. The future is bright for transit in this city, and we look forward to 2014 and the good things that are coming our way. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Holder. He has a brief update on this planned closure that we have to do.
Okay, thank you, John. Madam Chair, I just want to quickly inform people of a planned temporary suspension of the O-Train service. This is planned to start on Sunday, January the 19th, 2014, at 00:30 hours. And would continue through till Monday morning on January the 20th at 05:30 in the morning. This is part of the O-Train expansion project. The work that is required involves reconnecting signal electrical work from a new underground plant from the existing overhead plant. So we cannot safely operate the system whilst we basically cut the wires. So we're expecting the work to take about 12 hours, but we have over 24 hours available in the shutdown. So we believe that by 5:30 in the morning, then the trains will be running again.
Okay, any questions on the General Manager's update? Seeing none, received? Received, thank you. Item number 3, Presto update. Mr. Manconi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask Darryl Brown from Metrolinx to join me. I'm going to do my presentation, then he has a few slides at the end. Madam Chair, you recall when we launched earlier this year, you asked for regular updates on the distribution of the program. This is our final update as we've approached our target. Just to look back, the goal was to successfully distribute 200,000 no-fee Presto cards, get them into the hands of our customers, and hopefully result in their use, and also to support our customers so that their experience with Presto is a positive one. As you can see in this slide, Madam Chair, those were the targeted distribution groups, and we've exceeded some expectations, and we're at about 96% of the overall target. This slide just depicts it in a different fashion. What's important about the distribution is that we're successfully completed. What's left is distribution to our para-transpo customers and some EcoPass customers, and some of the targeted groups that we'll continue to do till we reach the objectives. Madam Chair, I'm happy to report that on usage and performance, things continue to get better and better every month. The November 30th data is very impressive. We have 158,000 cards in use. We have over 85,000 passes that have been loaded, and we have over 109,000 e-purse loads that have occurred. And almost 104,000 of our cards have been registered. And in terms of taps, we're approaching 18 million taps on the system. On card adoption and use, this continues to improve also. 73% of the cards that have been distributed have been used, and 48% of the cards have been registered. And we have 16,000 cardholders that have set up some form of auto-renew. And I can tell you that sharing this data with Metrolinx, they're very pleased, as you're seeing some of the highest adoption levels in the history of Presto. Madam Chair, this is the exciting news we wanted to share with you today. We've reached some milestones that are very significant. In October, the sale of monthly passes on Presto exceeded the sale of paper pass products. So the card is starting to achieve the objectives that we were looking for. And in November, over 100,000 cards were used, which again is very impressive. This slide depicts the trend on Presto loads for passes. Once we take out the EcoPass data in the future months, those numbers will improve even more. That includes the EcoPass holders prior to this. So you can see that Presto loads on passes is increasing over time. And Madam Chair, also some good news on ePurse. Cash and ticket usage is decreasing, which again is what we wanted. We wanted people to move to Presto ePurse. You made some very difficult decisions on the fare management strategy, and one of them was to encourage people to go to ePurse, and your initiative is working. So again, very impressive data. Moving in 2014, you'll recall a few commission meetings ago, I told you that I was going to be working with Mr. Pepper and our staff and Metrolinx to focus on the customer experience in 2014. The cards are out there. We need to continuously improve the experience for our customers, and we're planning to do that. We're also looking at, we looked at all the customer experience issues. We've cataloged those, and we're continuing to work with Presto to improve the experience. Mr. Brown is going to talk to you about version 2.2 in a moment. But Madam Chair, as you and the members of Commission know, I've written to Metrolinx and Presto. I know they're very, very busy with the Toronto project, but they need to work with us to improve the customer experience in 8 specific areas, and they're outlined in the letter that I gave to you. And we've had a positive response from Metrolinx. This feeds our quest to continue to improve that customer experience in the auto renew and auto load area, some work on our cash register systems, easier card registration, improvements on the experience for the customer. UPass needs to be done, as you'll hear in a future report today on the fare management strategy. We want to move to open payment for our visitors to our city, and we also need a single multi-day pass option in the system. So we've put that in writing to them that in 2014 we need to work in all those areas. What's also very important about moving to version 2.2, in addition to the benefits that Mr. Brown's going to outline, is that we will be able to reduce our load times for products purchased on the web down to 4 hours. So this version of 2.2 becomes the enabler for us, which we would do by the end of Q1 in 2014. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to Darrell.
Thank you, John. So in January, Presto is conducting a system-wide upgrade that will deliver the following benefits for customers in both the GTHA and for Ottawa. We will have one Presto card available for all customers in every jurisdiction in which Presto is offered. We will have interoperability between the GTHA and Ottawa, and the universal e-purse. Therefore, any customer traveling between Ottawa and the GTHA will be able to use their balance on their card to board any of the vehicles in the Presto network. We're going to have one unified website at prestocard.ca. Today there are currently 2 channels into the website, one for the GTHA, one for Ottawa. That will be unified into one common website for all customers. All customers will be served by the same website. It should reduce the amount of confusion that currently exists today. We are going to be able to enable the 4-hour downloads for loading and pass loads that Mr. Manconi just mentioned. That functionality comes with the 2.2 release and will allow OC Transpo to finish off with their components. We'll be able to upgrade and downgrade a future month's period pass, which is currently not available today. It'll be available on the prestocard.ca website. That will allow a customer during the current month to be able to upgrade or downgrade and have it effective at the beginning of the month for the next period. We will be enabling Visa debit for online purchases. We will have the ability to produce French language transit usage reports, which are used by cardholders in order to claim the federal transit tax credit on their income taxes, and new email notifications that will be provided with a lot more customer-friendly information, being able to adequately describe the actions that have just occurred. The upgrade will occur over the weekend of January 10th through the 12th. The period from January 5th to the 12th, the ability for customers to order new cards online will be disabled. Our mitigation in order to handle that is that customers will still be able to order cards in person at service locations. This capability will be turned off for both Ottawa and for the GTHA. Advanced notification to customers using online social media and emails will be made available to instruct customers what they should be doing in advance. And during the weekend of January 10th to the 12th, the entire prestocard.ca website will be shut down while we perform the cutover for the Ottawa system migration into the GTHA system. So during that period of time, all interactive services that the normal website or would have been available on the call center will be disabled. We will have established a microsite, an interim Presto Card website that will be able to direct Presto customers where they can receive service. There will be agents available at the call center to be able to help customers with their needs. However, we still will not be able to do any of the active online options such as loading value, loading passes, registering. We will continue to send out the advance notice. That communication program will start tomorrow from what I understand, and we will still be able to allow customers to load their cards in person at sales locations, and during the entire cut-over weekend, the Presto system is available for operation during for all fare payments. And that's that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the presentation. The one thing I want to also say is that we're going to be providing members of Commission and City Council with a full FAQ package with all this information, and obviously we have all our communication channels ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Manconi and Mr. Brown, for your presentation. There are a number of questions. I just have one, really, I think, to you, Mr. Brown, and that's around, I know Mr. Manconi sent you a letter last week around support as we move to version 2.2, and we're very happy to do that. The 4 hours as opposed to 48 hours is clearly a benefit, and there's a number of others, interoperability as well, very beneficial to us. But as you know, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing with the rollout of Presto here. We certainly met some challenges along the way, and we're still having challenges with the auto renew function. So we know that you're going to be very focused in 2014 on landing the TTC into the system, which is a pretty large, significant endeavor. But what we're looking for here is a commitment from Metrolinx that Ottawa will continue to be supported appropriately as we move forward. So I'm just wondering if you can provide to us a commitment that we will not be forgotten as TTC endeavors to become a Presto card member.
Thank you, Chair Deans. As Mr. Manconi mentioned in his slide package, there were a number of areas that they wish to see improvement, and we have that same desire in Presto to address those same areas. They are in our work plans moving forward. We share the desire of OC Transpo to keep innovating and improving on the customer experience, and we are looking very forward to having that dialogue with OC Transpo to understand the business requirements deeper and to look for the soonest opportunity to bring those implementations to bear.
Thank you. Commissioner Eglai.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation, both of you. Looks like Presto is well on its way to doing what we want it to do. And I think everybody around this table would like to foster that and move that forward. So Chair Deans asked you, and you said at the earliest possible opportunity. There's a couple of things in the letter that make me a little nervous, though. You talk about you'll be a strong advocate for us. That's great. But it says we will be a strong advocate with your support to have these improvements included in the 2014 plan. The next paragraph talks about having a limited number of production release windows available in a year, and further goes on to say once changes have been analyzed for size, complexity, and risk, we will be in a better position to determine a timetable. Now, I know Mr. Manconi hates it when I ask this kind of question, when I try and pin him down on a date, but I'm going to ask you, what is the soonest possible opportunity? When do you see these improvements coming to Ottawa? Because these are things that we get questions about as councillors and members of this commission every single day. So is this going to happen in 2014, and if so, when in 2014?
So the aim will be to deliver them through the year of 2014. They won't be delivered all at once. They'll have to be delivered in packages. The ability for us to be able to determine exact dates at this point is not possible because we have some system requirement definition that we still have to perform with OC Transpo and get the bottom line on some of the individual business items that we need to to address. So we will be working very, very diligently, though, and I think, as Mr. Hollis did point out in his memo, that we will be acting as a very strong advocate for the suggestions that Mr. Manconi has brought forward, as we ourselves see the benefit in that as well.
So I heard you say, well, you can't give us specific dates as to when each of these improvements will be made. They will all be made in 2014. Is that what I heard?
That is our plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Aguilar. Commissioner Tierney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'm pleased to see this, and I always refer back to the bill of goods we were given back in the day, the slide that shows version 2.2 will have all these features that you're mentioning here. I just wanted to go through them. So I see, open payment was part of your slide deck and matches up here. Key TTC features is in both as well. What about corporate accounts? Will that be included in this 2.2 upgrade as well?
No.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Could you repeat the question, Councillor?
So basically, I keep referring back to this slide that we got back in the day that shows the progression. I brought this up pretty much ad nauseum every meeting we've had. And I just want to make sure that everything that's listed in this slide that was also in this presentation today matches up. And one of the features that Presto 2.2 that is being shown here is corporate accounts. Would the corporate account feature be in the Presto 2.2 version as well?
No, Madam Chair, I've not heard anything about corporate accounts since Mr. Hollis took the file over. Certainly some of the other things that Commissioner Turney has been very passionate about is open payment, and I've listed that specifically. Right. We know where we stand on the para, and then these other things are, some of them touch on that slide that you've pointed out. I can tell you that Mr. Hollis has requested a refresh of the strategic plan. I've been an advocate of reminding him of your slide in terms of what was the original vision of Presto and where it is now. And so as a member of the executive team that meets quarterly, I'm part of that review. And what you see here are the priorities that I've put forward based on what I've been hearing from the customer experience. But I've also encouraged them to go back to the original plan, as you've pointed out, Commissioner Turney, to point out, and if there's things in there that aren't going to happen, we should have that discussion.
And I do appreciate that. It's just to make sure we go back to, the milestones that had been laid out a couple of years ago. And I think when that comes forward, that'd be great. But back to what we're going to see here for improvements, I think people will be very happy. I do have a slight concern about the back-out strategy or a parallel strategy in case things don't work. Technology is not perfect, and you only discover the issues when you actually roll something out. Are we going to be kept, abreast of any changes or what that strategy will be if something does go pear-shaped?
Madam Chair, we're mobilizing our teams like we did with the full rollout. We actually applied the 7 success criteria that you approved in the original rollout and applied it to this. And then we also have our technical and our customer support teams on both sides mobilized, and they meet regularly, and they have all the connections and everything else. So absolutely, if there's things that start to happen, we'll be informing you accordingly.
Great. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Commissioner Turner. Commissioner Johnson.
Just quickly, Madam Chair, I understand that OC Transpo requested of Metrolinx to include an optional overdraft service in the next software upgrade. I understand there's already the option for overdraft for one ride worth, and the user is then charged a 25-cent fee when they eventually reload their e-purse. Are there specific parameters or limitations that OC Transpo expects to see in this option, or is all that is changing here that users would have the option online to turn the autodraft option on or off?
Madam Chair, the request is to explore the opportunity to have each customer have the option for either opting in or opting out when they register their card.
And to clarify, this would entail them the ability to go beyond simply a one-ride overdraft?
No, that is not the intent. The intent is simply to allow customers to have the option to have the one-ride overdraft available to them. We've found through the introduction of Presto that there are customers who prefer not to have the option, but it currently is not. It is mandatory.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Crew.
First, a question for Mr. Manconi. You mentioned at the outset of your presentation that this would be the last of the regular rollout updates. I trust that we will continue to receive regular functionality updates as some of the improvements we're seeking are in fact rolled out and when they'll be coming, the likes of that kind of information.
Yes, Madam Chair. We'll share information with the Commission. I think what I wanted to point out is this is a formal presentation and so forth, so maybe what we can do is get into a memo approach or something like that, but we'll certainly give you updates. And if there's anything significant like this, we'd be before you.
And in particular, with regard to these, additional functionality improvements as they come, of course, we would, I certainly think I can speak for the Commission saying I'd like to hear about those. For Mr. Brown, thank you very much for coming today and for facing the condition on this. I've seen your correspondence between Mr. Manconi and Mr. Hollis in the response. Mr. Manconi does say that it's a positive response, but I see some notes of caution in here as well, and they're based in part on Ottawa's experience with Presto. So to that end, I recall when an implementation date first came up for Presto at an IT working group meeting, pointing out in about April or so of 2012 that perhaps Canada Day was not a wise day to have our first update on. On June the 20th of that year, we found out that you weren't going to be able to do that. Then we pushed the issue off to November with an original February launch date. And then, at the cost of $3 million of a refund in our capital cost, as well as getting a money-back guarantee, we ultimately pushed it off to an April decision, where finally we were confident enough to have the full launch on May 18th of this year. I guess my concern is when you say it is your plan to address all of those issues that Mr. Manconi says in 2014, that's exactly the kind of vague language that I heard before. So I'm kind of looking for I think that it's fair to say that Ottawa as a whole doesn't love Presto, that we're still needing to be sold on it. We still need to feel like we are a customer who is being courted by Metrolinx. So to that end, I'm first of all wondering if you can go one step further, would you be able to provide a written guarantee that Ottawa will be fully supported in the rollout of 2.2?
The rollout of 2.2 from a technical implementation perspective, we will have our full support team here available at the time when 2.2 is actually going to be implemented over that weekend. As for the improvements that Mr. Manconi has suggested in his note to us and in our response, we continue to advocate for those improvements to be part of the Presto system. It helps not only the customers here in Ottawa, it will help the customers across the board, and from our experiences of growing as an organization and growing with OC Transpo to make sure that these types of benefits are available for customers in order to be able to use the system in a much more holistic and easier fashion. So the bottom line is that the investigation into some of these still needs to occur. And when that investigation has been completed, we will know better where we will be able to slot these improvements into the release plan that's going to be developed and is currently under development now for 2014.
So in terms of our customer experience, you are guaranteeing us that we'll have the same level of customer support during the rollout of 2.2 that we regularly experience?
With the obvious absence of online services that won't be available during that rollout weekend.
I'm going to come to that point in a second. And I want to be clear, I'm happy for the rollout of 2.2. I think that 2.2 is starting to deliver on some of the things that we as a commission told our users that they would have when they got Presto. So in particular, I'm happy to see that the ePurse interoperability with the GTHA is a feature of this function, and I do want your assurances that at this stage it's looking green light that there will be no anticipated difficulties with that interoperability functionality as soon as we're over the down period.
Interoperability will be there. The ePurse will be universal between all systems on Presto.
Okay. The next issue I just note is that in addition to, it's reminiscent for me of that initial July 1st rollout date. I observed that the school break this year uniquely encompasses that first week of January, such that by my count, or just checking my calendar quickly here, Monday the 6th is the first day where all the students are back to school, where therefore parents that are taking vacations with their children are returning back to work. And in order to implement 2.2, there's a 5-day shutdown that encompasses and includes the period January 5th to 10th. And I'm wondering, I'm just seeing the potential, no matter how good our messaging is, and no matter how good your messaging is, that's the first week back, that people are going to be away on vacation or enjoying their festive season, will forget to load their pass, will go on to the 5th, only to discover that they can't currently do so. And to say that the solution is that you can still do so live and in person, that's what Presto was meant to avoid. So I'm wondering, first of all, is that timeline absolutely fixed at this stage? And kind of why on earth that timeline was chosen?
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask Mr. Pepper to go through that timeline selection date process, because we spent a lot of time thinking through that, and the Commissioner points out some very important points, but there's some logic behind those dates.
Madam Chair, I think it's important to underscore that the timing that we've chosen, in fact, is in alignment with the least amount of traffic, because the service that will not be available are those people who load ePurse online during a period. It does not affect in any way any of the auto-renew functions, any of the pass functions that people will have already utilized through their auto-renewal processes. So we are very confident that that weekend, in fact, is the best weekend. It also is during a period when we have we're as close to what we call our blackout period, when those past products would not be available anyways. And because it's so far into the month, we're very confident that those people who will have purchased their passes online will have done so. And so the limited number of people who load or increase the amount of ePurse is a very narrow window. In anticipation of those few people who are in that circumstance, what we are doing starting tomorrow will be the beginning of informing those customers through a number of different channels, but in particular in the middle of this month at all sales offices and on buses near the end of the month, there will be information reminding people for that very narrow window they will not be able to purchase ePurse online. So we're confident that those customers that don't do ePurse loading regularly, that we'll catch them that way. And for those few that don't, we do have other customer service mitigation plans in place.
So through the chair, what I'm hearing Mr. Pepper say is that at least this date has been chosen in careful consultation with OC, and it's something that we feel that we can manage.
Madam Chair, to be blunt, we insisted on that date.
Okay, so I'm happy to hear about that. And just to be clear that on the scope, for someone that manually loads a monthly pass, will that function be availability at that time or not? I just want to be very clear, with the city really, about what they can and cannot do during that time.
No, it will not be available, and that is why we've chosen such a date later in the month. An ideal date would have been a blackout period, but given a couple of other logistics, that was the best one that we landed on.
So auto reloads of ePurse and of passes will work, but manual of either will not during that window.
That is correct.
Okay. And then finally, once again for Mr. Brown, I understand that you can't give us a definite timeline. I'm wondering if at least you would be able to sit down with Mr. Manconi or his designates and give us a map of when those 8 features that Mr. Manconi's letter has addressed might be able to be implemented. I just would get more reassurance in that instead of a broad promise sometime 2014.
Yes, we will work with Mr. Manconi and his team to provide that roadmap.
Okay, well, I look forward to hearing a timeline of that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Crew. Commissioner Blowis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I do appreciate getting an update here in terms of how we move forward into 2014 with version 2.2. But I want to take a step back and look at the nitty-gritty of how the card is working now. And I know you sort of glossed over the numbers. We're almost celebrating that 100,000 cards have been used, and I guess it comes down to is the glass half empty or half full. And when I see that, only 1.17% of cards have been set for a requested reload by phone, 2.99% for e-purse auto load, and 3.5% for auto renewal, I'm not sure if those numbers are really that much to celebrate. And having 100,000 out of 200,000 being used, I guess that we're at 50%. And even in the cash fare and the ticket fare, we're at 30% using Presto, which means 70% of the folks out there haven't moved over yet. And I could regale you here. I could be waving my Charlie card, which I used not that long ago, and how well it worked, how easy it was to obtain for free, by the way, even as a temporary visitor to a place. I would say I'd go with the Charlie card. But having said that, and this is probably to Mr. Pepper, we've been sending you a number of sort of examples of complaints, and primarily they deal with how the card is being used when it doesn't function, and what happens to those complaints, and how long complaints sit with Metrolinx before they get resolved. So first of all, we're putting the operators in a bit of an awkward position, because there are times you can say that the card works 99% of the time. When cards don't work, especially if a card doesn't seem to be recognized by the reader, I would assume it's probably a malfunctioning card. What are the instructions to our operators in terms of how to resolve that?
The operators are provided with full training on how to deal with all aspects of fare collection, whether that be the Presto card, tickets, money, and other passes that are out there. And if I had my stack, it is quite remarkable the number of different types of fare media that people can use to board a bus. That being said, with a Presto card, they are instructed when depending on the type of error message that's received, if it says card blocked or if it says tap again or card not read, they act differently. Often they will ask someone to do a second tap because the person has not properly tapped in the first place. And I can speak personally of that experience, having done it myself just last week, where I didn't tap long enough, and I tapped a second time and got the correct message, which was card already tapped, because even though it had given me an error message, it had read my card. And so operators deal with a number of different scenarios. When it says card blocked, that tells the operator that the card has been blocked for a number of reasons, including the fact that it may have been hot listed. In those cases, the operator is instructed to collect the fare from the individual, and the individual is asked to then deal with customer relations, either at OC Transpo or at Presto, in order to either get that fare reimbursed. This is consistent with past practice in prior to Presto in terms of how operators would have dealt with fare disputes. That being said, the thing I always remind customers who email any member of Commission, Council, or OC Transpo, that the nice thing about Presto is we in fact do have an electronic footprint of what's occurred, and there have been cases in the media over the last several months, and all of those cases, the information that we have from the data collected paints a much clearer story about what has occurred, and we're able to clarify either that OC Transpo was in the wrong, Presto was in the wrong, or in some cases the customer was in the wrong. In all of those cases, we ensure that no customer is ever out of personal pocket for a mistake on our end. And in some cases, even when it's the customer's mistake, a reimbursement is done given this, depending on the situation.
But I guess to clarify that, when a customer is tapping, and if, let's say, is it happening where the cards do become defective and they don't get read by the reader at all? I mean, it's happened to me here with my employee pass. I thought maybe I was being blocked out of the office or whatever, which is always quite possible. But so what are we doing if a card is defective? Because what you're really saying is you won't be out of pocket, but you're standing there waiting to board a bus. Depending on where you are, you may not have the option of having any other fare available to you, whether you can go out and buy something. So are you getting booted off the bus and you're being told to find another way home? Is that what's happening?
I suspect not, and the councillor and I probably ride as many buses collectively as many of our customers, and I think you know as well as I do that our operators are incredibly customer-oriented when they find someone in a situation who boards a bus and provides a reasonable explanation given the circumstance. Fare aviators don't usually get on the bus and tell a long story. These are people who are usually in bus locations that are well known to the operator, maybe a regular route and so on, and they respond in a very positive way. Again, I've witnessed it many times where operators make the right call and allow that customer to board and deal with their fare problem in other ways. There are circumstances when an operator will stick to the letter of the law, that if you don't have your fare, then you have to deal with that by getting a fare, and that can be done by waiting for the next bus, talking to someone else on the bus, and getting it from them. And in those cases, if the fare is not available and the operator doesn't let them board, we also back up our operators because they are, in fact, enforcing the policy that's written.
Well, I think, and I think we recognize the difficulty that the operators placed in, but does this apply to the school routes as well, the 600 series, where, let's say you're a regular, you basically have one bus to get you home, and you're a regular rider. In fact, the school board provides the pass. So how do we exercise that discretion?
We've been dealing with very few of those cases since the school boards received their Presto cards. I can count on one hand the number of cases that have been brought to my attention, and I can assure you that we remind our operators, who are very good because they do those school routes and they know the rhythms of those routes, and I am very confident that operators would use very appropriate discretion for a young student who doesn't have the proper fare medium.
My final question deals with the lineups that our customers are still experiencing, and I know we're trying to, maybe that's part of the coercion, to get them to do more automated reloads or renewals. What are we doing, though, to try and reduce those lineups? We see the tweets, we get the complaints about how long lineups are. We see them when we walk by the kiosks.
We're approaching that in a number of different ways. One is to very much engage the customers. In the last 2 months, every customer at our main sales offices are receiving 2 types of brochures that are very simple and very clear about giving them the option that they have. It's a question that we're asking ourselves, why people in every other part of their lives, at the Rideau Centre, for example, they would have gone to a store and used remote and wireless functionality to pay for purchases, but for some reason they want to come and spend time with us at OC Transpo in line. We also know people who would have very easily used wireless and internet transactions on Black Monday, yet still want to go and stand in line to load their Presto card. We're spending a lot of time talking with them, trying to understand their behaviors so that we can move our 7% of auto-renew functionality up. And that 7% is consistent with many other auto-renew functions in the industry. It's my understanding that the Oyster card in London has a very similar pickup rate. So we see 7% as our starting point, and I'm very confident that with the work that we're doing with Presto next year around fixing some of the customer friendliness of the website, that we're going to be able to go well beyond the 7%, and from there we will see those lines being more appropriate to the customer service that's required at OC Transpo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bose. Commissioner Cowdery.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the update on the Presto card going to a 2.2 system. Question for Mr. Brown. Have you tested the 2.2 version at all?
Oh, yes. It's undergone extensive functional testing, system testing, experience testing in Toronto. It has participation with all of the transit agencies that will be included in this upgrade have all been participants in that as well, and have all verified that the functionality is there and that the functionality is working as prescribed.
Now, you're talking about testing within a lab environment or testing with the public?
It's both a lab environment and then a copy of what the public environment looks like, an environment that we call, affectionately labeled the pre-production lab.
So, in other words, you have picked a small area with public and tested that product going forward in terms of its operational ability. The reason I'm asking the question, Mr. Brown, is up until now, maybe not most recently, but when the Presto system was launched here in Ottawa, we at the Transit Commission mentioned some of the concerns that were being raised, and those concerns did come true in terms of its operability, some of the problems, some of the headaches that was caused by it. So I just want to make sure that if we take on a province-wide system, almost a province-wide system, that the system does work, and we're not putting the whole 3 or 4 municipalities into peril right after Christmas because the system, does not work, or the 2.2 version does not function properly.
We have done extensive testing in all areas.
Okay. So I know people don't give guarantees in writing. Could you put that in writing that it has been tested and it should work appropriately across the municipalities that you're putting into?
Commissioner, I would look to the transit agencies that have participated with us to provide us with the assurances that they've seen what they expect to see as part of this upgrade.
But they haven't operated.
We've provided all of those opportunities to test the system functionally and technically to make sure that all of the included components are performing as prescribed. And then we ask the transit agencies to come in and verify from their view, from their customer view, and from their operations view that each of these new pieces of functionality and that the system is operating the way they expect. And that has happened, and they have provided their sign-off to Presto. Presto would not deploy this out into the public space without having received that assurance from each of the transit agencies.
Okay, thank you for that. The concern I still have, and I will have until I see, past January next year, about the system working, to its full capabilities. What I would have done as a private business owner previously is maybe test a small market like City of Ottawa, for example, with a 2.2 version before I would launch it across the province. Because if you have hiccups, then at least they're controlled within that small environment versus going straight across the province in terms of carrying those problems forward. Or you may encounter new problems by doing that kind of a test. I won't belabor the point, but I'll express my concern even today that putting it across the 3 or 4 municipalities that you're planning on putting it across without, in my opinion, doing a proper testing out in the communities, I think it's not the right way to go. Having said that, I'll leave my comments there, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Cadre. Commissioner Blais.
Thank you very much. I've listened intently both to the presentations and to the questions, and to be perfectly honest, I still have some grave concerns about what is about to happen. So I'm hoping you might be able to put me over the finish line here. So first of all, as Councillor Tierney pointed out, we're not getting everything we were promised with 2.2. So this is really like version 2.1 and a half, because you can't sell us something 2 years ago saying when you get to this point, this is what you're going to get, not provide it all. So someone mentioned a refresh of the game plan. When are we going to see that refresh?
I'm not certain, Madam Chair. Mr. Hollis is driving that. I have a meeting with them later this week, a regular scheduled meeting, and I can certainly get updates, and we can have Metrolinx here back when that plan is refreshed. But I'll get you the timelines.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I'm also concerned, frankly, Mr. Brown, from Metrolinx's perspective, that you failed to put in writing some firm commitments, except for this wishy-washiness that it's in our work plan, we'd like to have it done, our goal is to achieve X, etc. As far as I understand, you're not running for election to anything at Presto or Metrolinx, so I was hoping I would get some more firm commitments. So I'm wondering, Mr. Manconi, what kind of consequences can we expect if those commitments are not lived up to?
Madam Chair, I wrote to Mr. Hollis, and I told him that at the regular scheduled meeting of this week, where I sit around the table with all the Presto partners, including Mr. McQuaig, who is Mr. Hollis's boss, that I will be repeating this message over and over again, that the implementation of Presto in the City of Ottawa is not over, The shift that has to occur is we have to wrap the customer experience around the card, not the other way around. This has to be for the customer and needs to work for them. And these features, these 8 things that I've listed here, I'm going to be unrelenting in requesting them. And I quite frankly don't, I've been very blunt with Mr. Hollis, I don't need any other things right now other than these things here, because they're all the things that you have raised, and they have been flushed out through all of the data that Mr. Pepper has collected, through the customer experience rollout, through the emails, through the examples that Mr. Blois brings out, and so forth. So these are the priorities, and I hope they resonate with everybody, but I've been clear, and I think my words speak to that effect in the letter. In terms of if I start to see any signs that this is not being executed in 2014, I can assure you that I'll be here speaking to you and briefing you. Mr. Brown, who I've worked with in the last year and a half or a year or so, is a man of his word, and I will be meeting with him early in January in Toronto, mapping out a work plan on these 8 upgrades and bringing it back to you. And if the answer is no, I will also be relaying that back to you.
Well, thank you for that. Mr. Brown, you've indicated a couple times you have to advocate for these things to happen. Who specifically do you have to advocate to? Like, are you not the boss? Can you just not tell them to do it?
The governance for Presto is all of the transit agencies combined. We look for all of the transit agencies to get on board at the same time.
So really, all transit agencies have to micromanage little features here and little features there? You can't just take some leadership and say, Ottawa needs this, you're going to get it?
We do take that leadership, but we do advocate on everyone's behalf. There are needs in Mississauga, Hamilton, Burlington that also need to be met, and we advocate on all parties' behalf.
Sure. So when you say advocate, though, the board still has to approve these little low-level
The board
minor
doesn't
changes?
approve. We approve as all of the transit agencies together, and based on all of our planning and our ability to provide these at the timing that we can, that is the process that we do follow.
So you still haven't described who approves it. You're saying we approve it all together. Who makes the final decision as to whether or not something gets implemented?
Mr. Manconi is part of that board that has that final say.
So that's what I said. So the board makes even minor, like, feature adjustments?
No, minor feature adjustments, if they're necessary, are something that can be implemented without taking it up to a strategic level, done when the opportunity exists and when we can get in.
Okay, so have any of the requests that Mr. Manconi has made on our behalf, have any of those been approved by this board or committee or what you call it?
When I was here in the summer of 2012 to help move the implementation along to today, we have had numerous changes that have been made to the Presto system on behalf of Ottawa that have gone as a result of the need here in Ottawa, regardless of what the rest of the transit agencies would have thought at that point.
Sure. Well, thank you for not answering my question. My question was, of the 8 things that Mr. Manconi has asked for, which have been approved for implementation and which have not yet been approved for implementation?
Of these 8? Yes, we're going to be talking about that when Mr. Manconi comes back down to the office in
So you're not sure which ones have been approved or not?
I'm sorry, sir.
You're not aware of which ones have been approved, or have they not been approved yet?
We'll be looking for an ability where we're going to slot all of these. We are, as I said, and Mr. Hollis has indicated that we have shown our support for all of these, and that we expect that all of these are going to be part of the solution going forward.
Yes, my question, though, is you've repeatedly indicated that you're advocating for, and therefore some kind of overseeing body or board needs to approve them. I'm getting from your non-answers that board has not yet approved the 8 requests for Mr. Manconi.
That board will be meeting on this coming week.
Okay, so the answer is no, they have not yet been approved.
That board is meeting this coming week.
Okay, thank you for avoiding the question altogether. I'm not sure your strategy around that, other than to piss me off, but it's working, so congratulations on that. So again, Mr. Manconi, what consequences can Metrolinx or Presto, or can we expect from them if they fail to deliver on those things that we're asking for, and or the smooth rollout of version 2.1.5?
So there's 2 questions there. There is a governing board of which the legal department can get into a description of that, but I don't think that's needed unless the commissioner would like that. I'm a member on that board. I'm going there on Thursday for a regular scheduled meeting, and my agenda has been made. It's the letter. It's to say, give authority to get these 8 enhancements to the City of Ottawa, which, by the way, every other Presto member will benefit from. So I'm assuming the answer is going to be yes. If the answer is no on Thursday, then we'll be taking a different approach. Not certain what that approach is at this time. With respect to 2.2, to give some assurances, we did take the 7 success criteria that you approved in the original rollout. We applied it to that. Mr. Delage, Mr. Pepper, and our finance department went down and did detailed testing in Toronto and also came back, and that actually drove those 4 items that are in my original letter here in terms of some of the deliverables, audited statements, and so forth. So they've cleared those hurdles also. So, and then the technical teams will be mobilized leading up to and throughout the rollout of 2.2.
Okay, so, but, you know, I go back to this notion that, you know, in response to Councillor Kadri's questions, this hasn't been field tested. It's been tested in a near field-like environment. So 2.2 gets upgraded in December, or in January, excuse me, and it doesn't work. What are the consequences, or what are the repercussions for Presto and Metrolinx? What can we expect as compensation for that failure?
I can't speak to that. You'd have to get that from Metrolinx.
Okay. Metrolinx is here. Go for it.
The question again, sir, if you wouldn't mind.
So you upgrade the system to 2.2 over the course of that weekend, and it fails miserably. What can we expect in the form of compensation or other form of fixing?
Well, if the implementation fails, we will be backing out of it. That's just normal standard practice when doing technical upgrades of this nature. So we wouldn't be moving forward with it if that were to be the case. If afterwards there is something that pops up, it'll be handled as it does with every other situation. We've done extensive testing on this to show that the functionality does perform as prescribed. We have shown that the experiences that should be expected, will be expected, have been tested, and the transit providers have also supplied their endorsement of how that does work in their environment. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, so those are exactly the same answers we got during the initial rollout. I was in several of those meetings about when we were going to do it. It kept on getting pushed. Have we tested it? Of course we've tested it. We're not stupid. We wouldn't go and launch something without testing it. We got those answers before. We're getting them again. And there's no outline of what the consequences are if you colossally fail again. You've been cagey with your answers. You failed, frankly, to answer questions. So, Mr. Manconi, in the future, if someone from Metrolinx is going to be here, I'd like them to have the ability to actually answer some questions. So, if this gentleman's not capable of doing that or unwilling to do that, I'd like to have someone from Metrolinx who is either more willing or more capable of answering those questions. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blais. Just a couple of questions. Right now, we're at version 2.1, correct?
Ottawa's on Presto 2.0.
2.0. So we're going from 2.0 to 2.2. So my limited knowledge of this type of project, that's not kind of a wholesale implementation like we did with the original rollout of Presto. This is, relatively speaking, minor changes. Is that correct?
We are migrating the Ottawa Presto environment into the GTHA environment, so it is a complete conversion and migration of all of the data and all of the functionality that was delivered specifically for Ottawa into the GTHA system, forming a new GTHA system that encompasses all of that new data from Ottawa, coupled with the data that already exists there tonight.
So I guess just in following up on the questions that my colleagues have asked, I guess I'm looking for you to describe to us how much risk is involved in moving to version 2.2 in terms of the overall customer experience.
Well, we have verified that all of the functionality that is currently in Ottawa's Presto 2.0 system has been migrated for the 2.2 system. We have verified that, and we have made statements and supplied that in writing to Mr. Manconi. The conversion weekend itself means that we bring all of the data that is in the 2.0 system across. There is relatively little risk in that. It's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of ensuring that the integrity of both the technical components of the system and the financial integrity, once it's complete, is all in place. And that's really the bottom line that happens during that migration weekend. The risk is relatively low. It is the same format. 2.1 was put in place as the same architecture that existed here in the Ottawa implementation originally.
So the financial risk at the back office then involves the tap. If I take my Presto card and I tap on the GO Transit system in Toronto, then GO Transit gets paid as opposed to OC Transpo, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, and vice versa. If someone from GO Transit taps in Ottawa, then OC Transpo gets paid. And that is where the financial change occurs in going to 2.2?
Yes, it's about merging both of those together. It's like merging two households to live into one.
And Mr. Manconi, are you confident that the risk is relatively low in moving to this version?
Madam Chair, as you know from the rollout, one of the key things that I was focused on was the reconciliation of our revenue stream. Ms. Similak and her team had dedicated resources actually down in Toronto looking at this, working with Mr. Brown and his team, because we wanted to ensure that the financial back office was rock solid, and we have their assurances. We took it a step further. We asked to see the PwC audit report, which has been received. So Marion, Ms. Similak, and our staff have reviewed that also, because obviously what you've touched on is very important.
Okay, and is there a cost to OC Transpo to move from version 2.0 to 2.2?
No, there is not.
Okay, so it's part of the overall package, and future upgrades are the same, there's no cost?
This is where the governance committee comes into play. There's certain requests that meet certain requirements. If you're asking for specialty upgrades, it has to go to the governance committee, and it's looked at, and they have to agree to that. What we're looking at in this letter is that everybody recognizes that this will benefit all of them, so we're hoping there's no cost to that. But again, that's part of the details that we have to look at.
Okay, and I think Mr. Brown and Mr. Manconi, you heard around the table today some angst around OC Transpo being supported properly as we move to 2.2. Probably stems a little bit out of, a bit of a rocky implementation that we had in the past. But I guess what I'm wondering, Mr. Manconi, is I presume that the two of you are going to be at that board meeting on Thursday, and you're going to probably share with them the discussion that we've had here today and the importance of OC Transpo being supported. If those 8 recommendations that you put before them on Thursday are not supported by the board that governs Metrolinx, how, Mr. Manconi, will you report back to the Transit Commission so we might consider whether or not we want to go to 2.2?
Madam Chair, my recommendation would be that you do move forward on 2.2, that you separate the two matters. 2.2 does give us some advantages, and one of the big ones that we've heard from our customers is it becomes the enabler to go to the 4-hour load time. That's a very significant win for our customers. We want to do that and get that done early in 2014, and then we separate the 8 items. We'll get the update, in the next week or so in terms of what the level of support is for the 8 items, and then we would move to a work plan process in January, of which I would be happy to report back either in my updates or some other form to the Commission on the 8 specific items.
Okay, so you will report back to us in the new year on that?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. I just finally want to say to Mr. Brown and to Metrolinx that I think you've heard some concern around the table today and some suggestions that it, reflects that we haven't necessarily had the easiest time in the rollout. But just looking at the slide that Mr. Manconi showed us earlier, with now 158,000 cards in use in the City of Ottawa, I do think that transit users in Ottawa are demonstrating their preference for Presto, and they are showing that they recognize the convenience that this card offers them as transit users. And I do believe that it's just going to get better and better as we go forward. So I think Ottawa transit users are showing the love for Presto. I think they really do feel that this is a real convenience card for them, and I think you will see Ottawa continuing to embrace this card as we go forward. But as Mr. Manconi said earlier, we recognize that this is a journey. We're not at the end of the road yet, and we need to keep working together. And I trust that you will take the message back to Metrolinx that we appreciate Presto and we're using it, and Ottawa is really, I think, trailblazing for the Presto smart card technology, but we do hope to continue to be supported as we make these upgrades here in the nation's capital. So thank you very much for being here today. Received on the update? Thank you. Turning then to item number 5, the fare control strategy, and Mr. Scrimger is going to make the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While Mr. Scrimger is getting set up, just some introductory comments. This is a very important initiative. It was in our work plan, and the work that Mr. Scrimger and his team have done is extensive, and it's exciting in that it starts to make the Confederation line be very, very real in terms of our operational aspects as we move from predominantly a bus company to a multimodal bus rail service. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Scrimger, and he'll walk you through this presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll just get myself organized here. So what we have for you today is our proposal to you for a rapid transit fare control strategy to work for the future on the Confederation line and the O-Train line. And this is further to the decision that was made around this time last year by Council to approve the Confederation line, and we're following the work plan that was outlined in that Confederation line approval report. So to recap the need we have for a new fare control strategy, we know these points. The Confederation line, 12.5 kilometers long with 13 stations, replacing the central part of the transitway rapid transit bus service with a capacity when it opens of 10,700 customers per hour per direction, so a little bit more than the number of customers we now carry on buses, but with a capacity of increasing to more than double that, to 24,000 customers per hour. Compared to any other light rail system in North America, we will be the busiest single line on the day we open, and then just grow from there. Each of these trains carries 600 customers, and to get that quantity of 10,700, that's about a train every 3 and a fraction more than 3 minutes, and as we know, opening in 2018. The 13 stations we mentioned, here's a view of Tunney's Pasture as it's being developed. 3 stations are underground. We have connections with the rapid transit bus service at 3 stations, Tunney's Pasture, Blair, and Herdman, and local bus connections at almost every station. We're proposing fare paid zones at 4 of the major transfer stations, the 3 with the rapid transit bus service and the 1 Bayview station with the O-Train. And I'll explain a little more about that coming up. And those 2 busiest terminal stations, Blair and Tunney's Pasture, will be very busy stations with about 170 buses an hour, which is about the same as the amount of service that we run on Albert and Slater's streets through downtown, and 9,000 customers transferring in the busiest hour of the morning and in the afternoon. So why a new fare control strategy? That shift to a multimodal system where most people will be traveling on both bus and train, and those very high capacity conditions required us to evaluate our strategy. So we had a project to determine what our strategy was and what equipment and systems would be required to make that work. The principles that we set out for ourselves and set out for our customers Our own goals for this project were to find a way to provide fast and efficient transfers, bus to train and train to bus, a very easy and intuitive customer experience. Presto, of course, remains the primary method of fare payment. We continue to need complete interoperability with the STO. We want to be compatible with future contactless credit and debit cards. We want to have the flexibility to allow for future fare media without boxing us in too much, and to continue some of our current practices, the current time transfer policy, and continue to accept cash at all locations so that customers would always have the choice of how they pay their fare, just as they do now. Very quickly, the 5 elements of the strategy that we're recommending, which we'll talk about in greater detail coming up, are the fare paid zones at major transfer stations, fare gates and fare vending machines at all stations, customer help points at all stations, transfers with barcodes on them for people transferring from bus to train, and that compatibility with future fare payment methods. So first, we'll walk through what the customers would experience, what the customers would see and do as they enter a system under this strategy. If you're starting your trip at a station, so you're not transferring by bus, you're walking to the station or you've got there, somebody's dropped you off. If you have a Presto card, you would enter the station, you would walk to the fare gate, you would tap the card on the fare gate and walk right through, and walk to the train platform, and you're on your way. If you're beginning your trip and you're paying by cash, you would enter the station, you'd walk to the fare vending machine, buy a one-ride ticket. There's other choices there for you too, but buy a one-ride ticket if that's what you're doing. Walk over to the fare gate, scan that ticket, and walk through and directly to the train platform. If you're making another sort of fare purchase, the fare vending machine would help with that. Customers who are going to end their trips at stations, that is, they end their trip, they walk to their destination, they're not transferring to any other train or bus. Get off the train, walk from the train platform to the fare gate, you walk straight through, you don't have to tap anything or scan anything, and you leave the station. If you're changing from bus to train, I mentioned the 4 busy stations, 3 of them for bus to train transfers, Tunney's Pasture, Herdman, and Blair. If you're at those stations, you would step off the bus, walk into the station building, and walk directly to the train platform. There's no barriers in your way. You don't need to tap anything or scan anything. At the other stations, you would step off the bus, you would walk into the station building, you'd walk to the fare gate, you'd scan your transfer if you paid cash on the bus or with a ticket on the bus, or you'd tap your Presto card if that's how you got on the bus, and walk through the fare gate and down to the train platform. If you're changing from train to bus, at the 3 busy transfer stations, you would walk from the train to the bus platform. You don't need to tap anything or scan anything. There's no barriers in your way. When the bus comes to the stop, all the doors open. Customers can get on. No tap, no scan required. If you're at that location, the station is configured in such a way that we know you have paid a fare to get there. At the other stations on the line, you would walk from the train to the fare gate. You'd walk through, just like previously, no tap or scan required. You'd walk to the bus stop on the street, and when you board the bus, you would tap the card or show the transfer or the one-ride ticket to the bus driver, and they would let you on the bus, just as customers do today when transferring from bus to bus. For those customers who are changing from train to train at Bayview Station, you would walk from one platform to the other, no barriers, no tap or swipe required. So going into more detail on those 5 elements of the recommended strategy. The fare paid zones at major stations, at the 4 stations, that would allow for transferring between the 2 modes, train to bus, or in one case train to train at Bayview Station, without any need to revalidate the fare payment. That allows for a very fast and efficient transfer and a very good customer experience. That's a well-established strategy in place on other high-capacity transit systems, and it's particularly common in Toronto. And here's an example of how that would look at Tunney's Pasture. I'll see if I can point here. The shaded area would be the area that is the fare paid zone. So people who are arriving on buses from the transitway would be able to walk into the station, down to the platform level, and continue on towards downtown. But if they're walking in from street level, they would go through a fare gate here, here, or here to get into that fare paid area, and then they could transfer either to a bus, or then they could board either a bus or a train. Second element is fare gates and fare vending machines at stations. The fare gates define and protect the fare paid zone. That makes it very clear where you need to be, where you can't be unless you've paid a fare. You must pay a fare to pass through the fare gate. You can't get through that line without having paid your fare in one way or another. And that meets those operating requirements that we set out earlier and has additional safety and security benefits. We get fast and efficient transfers. It's a very well-established system at most rapid transit systems around the world. Very easy and intuitive. You know where you're paying your fare. It minimizes fare evasion and trespassing because to get to platform level or inside the fare paid area, you must have paid a fare. And it allows us to more easily control crowding on very busy days, such as leaving downtown the evening of July 1st. We'll be able to control those gates, lock those gates, and meter how people get to the platform so that people can be held up at street level and only go down to track level when a train arrives and has space for them. So here's an example of what one of the underground stations could look like. This is actually Parliament Station. And on this, we're looking at a mid-level, one level below street level, one level above platform level. Customers who are entering the station would come down these stairs, elevators, or escalators into this central area, pay their fare as they go through this line here or this line here into the fare paid zones at the two ends, and then they're from there down on the stairs or elevator down to track level. This is what a fare gate looks like. This is an example of an accessible fare gate, wide enough for people who use a wheelchair or who have some luggage with them or pushing a stroller or bringing a bicycle on board. It's a wider fare gate than most of the others would be. The fare gate functions. It needs to have a smart card reader and a barcode reader. At each station there would be a minimum of 4 fare gates. One of them would be barrier-free, accessible. Many of the stations need more than that because they have more entrances or because they're busier stations. All the fare gates will be capable of operating in both directions, so that 4 might be 3 in and 1 out in the morning rush hour, and then 3 out and 1 in the afternoon rush hour. We can adjust it. And the fare gates need to be capable of operating in our climate. And the particular challenges in Ottawa are the combination of cold temperatures with high humidity, which can cause ice on small mechanical parts. The fare vending machines look like this. Here's a picture of one in Seattle. The functions that we're listing for the fare vending machines: to be able to refill your Presto EPRs, purchase a new monthly pass on a Presto card, check your Presto balance, purchase a day pass or a multi-day pass, purchase a companion fare, who's someone who's traveling with you if you have a Presto card, purchase a single ride ticket, and issue a brand new fresh Presto card. We would accept cash, credit, debit, and Presto as payment. At each station there would be a minimum of 2 machines to ensure that there's always at least one available if the other one is undergoing some service, and there's more than that at the busier stations. The next element is to have customer help points at all the stations. Those help points, such as the one shown on the right, have a video link and an audio link so that when you're speaking to the customer service agent to ask questions about the service or about the fares, you can see that person, the person can see you, you can show them what your card or transfer looks like, and we would have barcode readers and Presto smart card readers on that device so that the customer service agent can help you with whatever your problem is. The customer service rep would be back at the call center, but would be able to answer questions from any of the entrances across any of the stations, and we can scale up or down the number of people assigned to that task depending on how busy that time of day is. Transfers with barcodes, we would stick with very similar to the transfer we have now, except that the transfer printer that's on the bus would print a barcode. So that there's an example on the right of what that could look like. You'll see it's very, very similar, and it's our current printers have this capability. The barcodes would, the transfers would still have the human readable side of things as well as the machine readable, showing the date, showing the expiry time, and showing the category of fare, so that customers would know what time their transfer is valid until, and operators on buses would be able to read it, and fare inspectors would be able to read it as well. So here's an example of how a station could be laid out. This is a view of what Blair Station could look like, and you can see a couple of customers using fare vending machines on the left, and you can see one version of a fare gate on the right, those silver boxes with the horizontal arm, and then there's a glass panel there on the left that also separates the fare paid area from the unpaid area. This table, which is in the report, also gives our estimates of the number of fare gates, the number of vending machines, and the number of customer help points we would install at the different stations. And you can see that some of the stations which are have fewer people starting a trip there don't need so many fare vending machines, or fewer people walking in from the street don't need so many fare gates, where more of the transferring is happening by bus that's handled through the fare paid area. And you can also see that stations that have more entrances, like Pimisi Station with 3 separate entrances, needs more because it has more places where customers can get into the station. A part of our strategy is also to install this equipment at the O-Train stations, and so these are the numbers that would be required at those 5 stations. Bayview's on both lists, showing the same numbers. Greenboro would also be a location where there would be fare paid transferring between buses and trains once we get to this point. So the requirements to work in Ottawa, the fare gate needs to meet our customer flow requirements. Every one of these fare machines, the gates and the fare vending machines, has a certain standard cycle time, how many people can walk through a gate per minute, or how many people can make their transactions per minute or per hour. And we need to get machines that meet our customer flow requirements, not only now, but in the future. The fare gates need to be suitable for use in stations where there isn't a full-time staff member always there, so we want to make sure they're tall enough that people won't jump over them easily. They need to be capable of operating in the Ottawa climate, and of course we need to have accessible gates at all fare control entrances. So this equipment and these systems would allow people to pay their fares in quite a few different ways. On the left, our current fare types, the Presto Monthly Pass, the STO Electronic Monthly Pass, the Presto ePurse, the U-Pass, which we will have to get over to be a machine-readable form by that point, day passes, tickets, cash, and transfers from bus. But we're also building in the ability to move to more of the future fare types on the right-hand side. We will need to tick off the first one of those later in the middle of next year as event tickets at Lansdowne that include your transit fare as part of your event ticket. We need to be able to accept those at the fare gates. A multi-day pass, we want to allow people to pay by credit card, debit card, flash debit card, that's the debit card that doesn't require you to type in a PIN. Mobile using a barcode on the screen of your phone, or mobile using an NFC chip in your phone. And there will be more in the future, and as long as they're compatible with card readers and with barcode readers, we'll be able to accept them. Presto smart cards remain the #1 payment method and always will be. All of our systems and equipment will be compatible with Presto. There are smart card readers on buses now, and we will have smart card readers on the fare gates, on the fare vending machines, and at the customer help points. Cash continues to be accepted on board buses and at the fare vending machines at stations. Transfers and one-ride tickets, people will get a transfer as when they're on a bus, and they can use that either to transfer to another bus or to scan that and enter into a station. And each barcode will be individually encoded with a serial number so that it can only be used once, and to just as you experience now if you're going to a hockey game or to an event at Centrepoint Theatre. They scan it, and it won't scan the same number twice. Mobile and event ticketing, as I mentioned, Lansdowne Park, but also the easy transition to mobile ticketing. You can see in the top picture there someone scanning a barcode from their phone. And we move to event and multimodal ticketing, a possibility of more things than just Lansdowne, the possibility of possibly shared tickets with Via Rail Canada, with anyone else who'd like to enter into an arrangement with us by that point. We can print the code almost any way and use it to enter into a station. Day passes and multi-day passes are both allowed for in the strategy. There's different ways that these day passes could work. We've talked about disposable smart cards in the past. Commissioner Blow has talked about a refundable smart card or a free smart card that he used in another city, or these could be done with passes with barcodes printed on them. And depending on how this works, we could sell some of these at fare vending machines and some through the vendor network across the city. Credit cards and debit cards, we anticipate that credit cards could be used if they're able to tap either at fare vending machines and on buses, and customers would get a ticket or a transfer in return. Debit cards that would require a PIN only at fare vending machines, because only those would have PIN pads on them. The flash debit cards, depending on each customer's arrangement with their own bank, would be used the same way as the credit card at the fare vending machines and on buses. Customers receive a ticket or a transfer, and they use that ticket or transfer and scan that to walk through the fare gate. So our schedule to procure this in time for Confederation Line opening works this way. We would work together with the Rail Implementation Office to develop a procurement strategy in 2014. Well, that strategy will be set up to meet all of the timelines in the Confederation Line construction, and we'll make sure that the vendor integrates that into the Confederation Line construction. The RTG, the contractor who is building the Confederation Line, already has the hooks in their contract that require them to expect this work to occur. So implementation would come first at O-train stations. We would install all of the equipment at O-train stations, we hope, a couple of years before Confederation Line. That will allow us to get a good couple of years of testing in maybe what you could say as a non-essential way, but it would become essential quickly. By that point, we would have to have barcode transfers in all our buses. We would have to have U-passes be machine readable. But it would get us a couple of years of experience with all of the equipment, and would get the vendor a couple of years of Ottawa experience before the Confederation Line opens. So the Confederation Line equipment would all be installed and working before the line starts running. And then as future extensions or additional stations for both lines occur over the next few years, as approved in the Transportation Master Plan, installing this equipment would just be a regular part of the work, and all stations would have this equipment in as they open. So there's our timeline, reporting to you and recommending the strategy to you here at the end of 13, doing that procurement work and developing a capital budget during 14 so we can bring that back to you late in 14 for your consideration for the 2015 capital budget, and then in 2015 and 16 starting with that procurement, beginning with the installation at O-train stations, and then the installation at Confederation Line stations really happening as the construction continues with RTG's schedule, so that it's all in place for 2018. And that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Well, there are lots of those. So we'll start with Commissioner Blais.
Thanks very much. My questions are around the fare gates. Specifically, what happens if they stop working? Like, how many employees are we going to have in each station and what backup process are we going to have to let people in and out of the stations if the gates stop working for some reason?
Thank you. Madam Chair, the first of those would be that the customer service center will have video connections to all stations at all times, and if someone comes over and uses the customer help point to report that a gate won't open, the customer service agent has the ability to unlock that gate and let that customer through. Part of the procurement will need to be developing a strategy of who's responding. Is it the vendor that has maintenance staff that are responding? Do they have to respond within a certain number of minutes, or how does that work? Usually in systems like this, if one gate is failing for a mechanical reason, the other adjacent gates are still working. If there's a system problem, then that has to be jumped on even more quickly.
Thank you. So we are going to have employees in all the stations, though, that can in some way manually open the gates in the event that there is a system problem? Like, and we'll just eat the loss that day? Like, if I'm envisioning you get to Place d'Orleans or you get to Blair Road, excuse me, and the gates just, you can't get in.
We'll have OC Transpo staff. We expect that, if it's the vendor's responsibility to do maintenance, the vendor would have staff that are roving and able to repair things or make decisions. The customer service agents, as I say, or the control center can open the gates remotely, unlock them remotely. If somebody has to be there, we have staff who are supervising all of the operations, and this would be part of their job. We haven't proposed, though, that there be a full-time staff member in each station at all times. That's quite an expensive proposition for 13 stations. Some of those stations have 3 entrances, 3 shifts, weekends, all to cover. It's a very, very high cost to put this full-time staff member, but we'll have people who are roaming the system on trains. We'll have people who can respond in cars if they need to, and we'll at busy times have people at the busy stations.
And will part of the procurement process be that this has to be a proven technology? We're not going to be going with someone new who's never done it before?
Yes, it will, and in particular, we'll be asking for proof that it's proven in our kind of climate and at our kind of customer volumes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Blake. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 8 in the report indicates that the fare paid zones, so these are Tunney's Pasture, Herdman, Blair, and Bayview. Within the zone, there would be no need for any further fare transaction. I'm wondering, how does OC Transpo's messaging to always tap jive with plans for a fare paid zone? Like I see in the report that the 40-foot buses would use backdoor boarding in order to speed up the process. Wondering, would Presto machines be installed at the back doors of the 40-footers, or are we looking at the always tap messaging no longer being promoted so heavily?
Madam Chair, we would refine that message, of course, by that point, because there is no need for customers to tap when boarding through any door on any bus at those stations. There's no need to install more Presto readers on the buses. The message now is always tap. The message in 2018 will have to be phrased a little differently.
So in terms of tracking data on usage, we depend on the automatic passenger counting system on the trains and on the buses?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, now page 7 indicates why the proof of payment method is not preferred, citing issues with fare inspection costs and other concerns. So I understand there would be no plans to have fare inspectors within the fare paid zones. How would enforcement be carried out for someone who might jump the turnstile or otherwise evade paying their fare?
It would be in a similar way to anyone who might trespass anywhere now, that we would have cameras on those fare lines. A special constable could respond. There would be, it's someone who trespasses by crossing in an area where they don't have authority to be.
I understand there will be security cameras pointed at the turnstiles that are monitored 24/7 by our control center?
That's correct.
And then that data can be used to aid enforcement as required, correct?
As I understand it, yes.
How will this work if a customer enters a fare paid zone when their transfer window is near expiration? Is it their responsibility to know when the transfer expires because there's not going to be enforcement within the fare paid zones?
Madam Chair, every transfer that is a paper transfer shows the expiry time on it. Every transfer that is on a Presto card has showed that time as the person taps. If anyone has a question about the validity of their transfer period on their Presto card, they can walk to one of the fare vending machines and do a card inquiry there. But there's no need for them to reprove anything as they step on that bus. So an example of someone who doesn't get that feedback at that point might be someone who's traveling from, well, let's say they're traveling from Rideau Street, transfer to the train at Rideau Station, take the train to Tunney's Pasture, board a number 95 bus through any door, and when they get to Baseline Station, they're transferring to a 118. That would be the next time when they see an operator and show them the transfer, and if the transfer is expired, then they'd need to pay another fare. But normally, most people can complete their trips during the transfer window.
Okay. And in terms of, I understand OC Transpo recommends avoiding the use of staffed collector booths in light of the cost. I certainly agree. Am I correct that the safety and security at the stations will be ensured through the CCTV systems as well as the special constable force? Could staff elaborate on how that will work?
Madam Chair, I think the Commissioner has explained it very well. There's CCTV coverage. We imagine we might have some customer service representatives moving around the system to help people. Certainly at the busy times, transit law, special constables would be able to respond to anything. And there's emergency call boxes and the customer help points available for anyone who needs to call in to report any questions or worries that they have.
Just so that there's no perception of a place being empty late at night because there's no staff booth there like there is in the GTA, for example. The 48 special constables will be heavily patrolling the fare paid zones and the LRT?
Yes. They're going to, right now they patrol via car. They're going to be out on those trains, riding the trains, and in the stations.
I brought this up when we renewed our agreement for the special constables, but does OC Transpo foresee any need to recommend an increase to the number of special constables over the next few years?
Madam Chair, one of the projects that we're doing right now is to look at our new state in terms of organizational structure, what type of resources we need, such as the customer service reps that Mr. Scrimgeour speaks to, the number of special constables and so forth. So we're spending the next year or two modeling all that out.
Okay. Thank you. Now, on the there were several mentions in the report of interoperability with the STO, of course. At page 15 also indicates that barcode transfers would need to be implemented aboard STO buses. Could staff outline feedback received from the STO on this proposed strategy, implications on their side?
Madam Chair, the STO understands what we're proposing. The STO is considering their own fare strategy, and we will work with them to ensure that the two are aligned. We do think, however, our staff position is that if there's an Ottawa decision that requires an expenditure of money on STO buses that's not for STO's benefit, that we should bear the cost as part of this project. It's us that are building the Confederation line, and if we need something on their buses to ensure that their buses can print transfers to our specifications, we may need to fund that from our budget. On the other hand, we don't know exactly what their fare strategy is, how they're proposing in the future to handle single rides, but we'll be working with them over the next very few months, or these next year, really, as we set up the specs before we go into procurement.
Okay. I'm sure there's regular collaboration going on. I just wanted to ensure we wouldn't be in a position where they might not want to go that route, and we would be having a situation where we couldn't produce our barcode on their tickets. But there's no indication that that would ever come to be. The relationship is continuing, and we would try to match our system to theirs and vice versa.
Madam Chair, the OC Transpo and STO collaboration has been going on for decades now, and has adapted to many, many changes of all sorts of technology and policy.
Could Mr. Scrimgeour speak a bit more about collaboration with the STO in terms of future route planning, given that so many of their routes come into Ottawa in the vicinity of where the Confederation line will be?
Madam Chair, of course we do that regularly, and the recommendations in this report don't change that at all.
Okay, I'm sure I'll see more on that when we start with the route planning for bringing the Confederation line online. Now, on page 9, it outlines the fare vending machines that Mr. Scrimgeour also presented, that these will be available at every fare control entrance. I've spoken to friends in the GTA, and they've advised me that their quote-unquote fare vending machines, they can only load e-purse online or in person. The machines are really around for just balance checking. So these machines would seem to be pretty impressive, and that you could refill an e-purse, purchase a monthly pass, and even purchase an actual Presto card. Why are we not getting these any sooner?
Madam Chair, we anticipate that we will be able to start to acquire these things as soon as we have a vendor on board. We will set our specifications, we will ask the Commission and Council for a capital budget, and then we will go out to the market.
Does OC Transpo feel that we're saving any money with the long lineups we're having and having to extensively staff the Rideau Center and Lincoln Fields and other service centers versus going the route of these machines? I'm just trying to understand more clearly why, if given that the positive impact they could have on the lineups, why they weren't brought in sooner or considered.
Madam Chair, we're not proposing these as an alternative to our current sales offices. This is the fare control system at the 13 stations on the line. We do think that the current sales offices and sales and information offices need to be there for the more complex transactions, for the transactions that should be done face-to-face, and for asking questions of OC Transpo that customers wouldn't prefer to ask over the phone, over the internet, or through our audio-visual help points. Those sales offices would always remain. This does give another alternative for people, in addition to the ones we were speaking of earlier this afternoon, to make some of those more routine transactions.
And the plan is for these, I understand they're going to first be put at the O-train stops in 2016, so this will be in the 2015 capital budget proposal with the intention of bringing them online in 2016 as per page 14?
That is our plan, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Eglai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. In light of the fact that we're going to essentially an automated system and we're not going to have that many people on the ground, my question is, what are we building into the specs for the fare distribution machines and the readers and everything else to make them as vandal-proof as possible? Like, how tough? I saw that they're going to stand up to our weather, and that's great. But a lot of these stations are open late in the evening. There's not a lot of people around, and there's an opportunity to do damage if people choose to do that. So what steps are we taking in that regard?
Madam Chair, there are industry best practices in this. We'll be asking that they meet. We'll as part of our more detailed specification writing in 2014, we'll be looking at those best practices across the industry, across the world, and we will also be putting some responsibility onto the vendors to ensure that the equipment they sell us is fit for its purpose, and that will stand up. We're hoping to have as few moving parts as possible in these things, and looking at all recent experiences, and there have been, strange things have happened in cities recently, and future generations build in barriers to some of these innovative types of vandalism being tried.
Well, you opened the door, so I have to ask the question, what sort of strange things have been happening recently in other cities?
There was news articles about someone mounting a camera on a fare vending machine in suburban New York that had a camera that looked down at the pin pad and watched people as they recorded, and they'd built it in such a way of that it looked like it was part of the machine. We had the experience in Ottawa of people driving trucks into our transitway stations and trying to haul away ATMs. We've heard stories of people pouring inflammable liquids into machines. So you have to build all of these things into the the newer technology, more electronic and more sealed up, achieves all of that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Eglai. Commissioner Crew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on Councillor Eglai's comments, I want to just highlight some of the comments on page 15. So my understanding is there will be a camera trained on each individual gate as well as each of the fare dispensing devices.
Madam Chair, either trained upon it or aimable to it as the help button is pushed.
And that is part of the, we'll be certainly looking at industry best practices on this. That would include any changes to be brought before this commission or council in terms of the regulatory framework surrounding, for example, an offense of tampering with a fare machine.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, and Certainly I'm aware that the City of Ottawa and OC Transpo are working towards the development of a safety lens with particular focus on women's safety. I know that Mr. Pepper is working on a working group with a number of stakeholder groups, and he's doing some excellent work there. I trust that once that safety lens is developed, that although it's not in place yet, that issues such as the placement of the fare gates, if and when there are staff personnel at stations, could all be assessed through the safety lens once it is developed to make sure that we're also complying with industry best practices in those regards as well.
Yes, Madam Chair, absolutely. The safety lens and also CEPTED design process that looks at safety as a primary focus, and also inheriting best practices. Just a reminder that we're not the first to be doing this, so we'll be looking at across the world on bringing in best practices. For example, New York City has over 100 subway stations that are not staffed, so we'll look at those experiences also.
Okay, I'm glad to see that that's been included right from the outset, is such a focus on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Crew. Commissioner Tierney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at the actual gate numbers for the installations, and it was on slide 22. Blair being one of the hubs, I noticed it says 2 fare vending machines and 4 fare gates, but yet on the other side of the spine, I guess you could say I noticed 12. Do you anticipate, like I'm assuming there was some evaluation on how you determined how many gates would be there, do you want to comment on that? I'm looking at it and going, wow, these are two very different numbers, and we have the highest modal split in the East End, so I'm confused why the number is much higher in the West End.
Madam Chair, all of the numbers, of course, were based on our customer flow projections for the future, based on, which were developed up from our current ridership and looking on with all of the future land use changes, all of the future transportation changes in the city. And then they're adapted to each one of the stations to accommodate the customers as they will use each station and as they're designed. Blair Station is designed with a single entrance through which all customers who aren't transferring from another bus will enter. And we can size that for the number of people who are walking in from Gloucester Centre, from Telesat Court, and from the CSIS and CSE to the north and to the office buildings to the east. They will all enter at one point, and we'll size that appropriately. At some of the other stations, Tunney's Pasture, Pimisi, the downtown stations, there's more than one entrance. There might be an East End entrance and a West End entrance. So we need a fare line with gates and help points and cameras and fare vending machines at each one of those entrances. Blair is just designed in a way where everyone focuses through a single point. But the most important point about Blair is that most people using Blair are transferring between bus and train or train and bus. And they're handled by the fare paid area. They walk directly from the train platform to the bus platform or the reverse, and they don't need to pass through any gate whatsoever. Tunney's Pasture is different from Blair. There's more people walking in and out to nearby employment, nearby residential, and the station is designed with 3 separate entrances. So part of it's the volume, part of it's the nature of the way people are changing, and part of it's the way the stations are laid out.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Scrimshaw, and I trust you've really analyzed this. I'm more of a visual person, so I think when we get to that, and I've raised it before, the spoke and hub model, I think that's what I'm failing to envision at this point on how all those specific routes will tie into these different nodes. I raised this before. I think it might have been the last commission meeting. When will we get to the point where we're actually looking at that full spoke and hub model?
Madam Chair, the Commissioner did point that out in the past. So some of the work that Mr. Scrimger is doing is we have a series of projects that looks at how we shift into the new service. He's just begun the work at mapping out what all the feeder routes look like, and one of the things we're going to do is stop referring to it as hub and spoke. We're going to brand it something because it's not exactly that, but we'll certainly share that information with the Commission in terms of an information report or something like that, because we need to make that real in terms of what it looks like, all those routes coming in from the east and the west to those major transfer points, so that it touches on exactly what you're talking about. So that work has just started.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Tierney. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few questions relating to the customer help point specifically. In the report, when we say they're recommended for every fare line, does that encompass the whole O train, every stop on the O train, and then all of the 13 stops on the Confederation line?
Madam Chair, yes, it does. It encompasses not only every station, but every entrance to every station, and both on the inside and outside of every station. So both inside and outside the fare paid area, so people can ask the questions that they need to at the moment they have them at the point where they are.
Okay, and then I just want to make sure I understand. So based on the proposal that we're seeing here, which is very high level, I understand, does that mean that there won't be there's no plan to have any in-person OC Transpo staff or vendor staff stationed at any of those locations permanently? Or are there some plans for some at certain high volume hubs?
Madam Chair, no, it doesn't mean that. What it means is that we won't be assigning staff specifically to have their sole function to be to administer the fare control system. There will still be staff in many of these stations. There will be roaming staff, as we talked about earlier, customer service staff, supervisors, special constables. Some stations have the ability in them to have retail functions at or nearby. There'd be the possibility of someone working there. Rideau Station has currently the Sales and Information Office. Right now it's in the Rideau Centre. We will have to work out exactly where that goes, and we will be able to assign more roaming staff at busy times and dial it down at other times of the day and use whatever is appropriate. But what this strategy means is that we're not assigning people so that their single dedicated responsibility is to ensure that people have paid their fares. These people that we're talking about will have many more responsibilities than just that.
Okay, so then that answers my question. So that doesn't mean that everyone can read this and expect that when they show up at one of the stations that they wouldn't be able to, at some of them at least, go and seek out someone in person for help at some of the locations?
That's, Madam Chair, yes, they'd be able to do that, but if there's ever a time when they would ever need to speak to someone and there's no one there at that moment, or if they're in another part of the station, they can go to the customer help point and speak directly to someone at our call center who will be able to send someone out to speak to them or answer their question sort of over the phone while they're there.
Great. In the report, there were two examples referenced. The one was in Vancouver, where they're implementing audio-only stations. And then I know the one with both audio and visual is in the UK. Are there any other examples in North America where they've utilized this technology of having both visual and audio help points for customers?
Madam Chair, most of the new experience in this in North America is with audio only. The audiovisual does exist in other parts of the world, does exist in other industries than just transit, and we will be looking for proposals from the vendors to bring those together. There are companies which do exist to do this specifically for transportation, and there's companies around the world which do this for other things than just transit. So bringing that all together, but we're pushing it a little, because by the year 2018, we think most people will find things like FaceTime on their iPhone routine, and that kind of experience will be more reassuring than just the faceless voice over the phone.
Okay, so well, I understand that we're just looking at it at this high level, and then you're going to go forward if we recommend it or approve it to develop the procurement strategy and the capital budget envelope. Will we be getting the procurement strategy in advance of the capital budget recommendations?
No, Madam Chair, you will not. We're in a design-build mode with the $2.1 billion Confederation line, and we have very tight timelines. So this report, if it's approved today, it goes off to the Rail Implementation Office, and we work with them in terms of the procurement strategy because they have design fit-ups and everything that they need to do within those stations. So we will not be coming back with a procurement strategy. It is what's in this report, essentially.
We will, however, be getting updates on it as it goes forward?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Wong. Commissioner Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, going back to the machines and things, of which there are going to be quite a few, are they going to be, in your procurement strategy, are you going to ensure that they have graffiti-free or graffiti easy to remove on the machines? Because these ones are sometimes targeted.
Yes, Madam Chair, it's certainly one of the considerations, durability, and we have to also find the correct balance of risk and maintenance between us as the client and whoever the vendor is. That
But there are finishes you can put on, make it easy to clean, and those which don't. And they don't. When you're building them, they cost almost nothing to do, but adding them later is very costly.
Yes, Madam Chair, from my old world, I know those special coatings very well, and we will certainly be including that in the spec.
And the follow-up on the procurement one, because I had a similar concern on that, if we're going to be dealing with this in the 2015 budget, which is just less than a year away, or I guess because it's election, it'll be a little longer than a year away, you have to have the procurement strategy for that budget. Otherwise, you couldn't figure the budget. Would be at that time at least be able to find out how you're going about doing it? Because we've had problems in major procurements before, and I wouldn't want another one to happen.
Madam Chair, I'm very sensitive to the concerns that the Commissioner is expressing. I'd be happy to provide information updates on the strategy and as we move through. It's just we have critical timelines, but I will certainly in various GM updates or so forth. I think it speaks to both Commissioners' comments. We'll provide you with updates
I
as we
think
move through.
as you're doing it, because I don't want to add an extra load on it, but you certainly have to have it done to do the budget, so it should come together. And the next question was on the budget itself. I saw somewhere that we were looking at 20 to 25 million. I thought I saw somewhere, and you said it was already in the overall financial review we did between now and 2031. That amount is in there. How sure are you in that amount then?
Madam Chair, that estimate was built with Mr. Scrimger and the consultant that we used on the team and looking at best practices. We're confident with the estimate, but that's part of the work that we'll do with the procurement strategy, and Mr. Byrne is part of the team, so he'll help us with that also.
So if it turns out by the time we're going out, by the time the 2015 budget comes out of it, much different than that, will there be some sort of an update about how that's being handled within that overall financial strategy? Because it could throw everything off kilter if it's very much different.
Again, Madam Chair, I certainly understand the sensitivities, and yes, if it's way off, we'll certainly be talking to you. We're confident with this number, but if things change dramatically, we'll certainly we'll let you know. And then also the critical thing, as I did in the budget process, is everything that we do has to go through the affordability lens. And so you see our finance partners over there on the side table. They're part of this also. They remind us of the same thing you just did.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilkinson. Commissioner Johnson.
I had a couple of other questions, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to see the equity inclusion lens included on page 15, but I do already get complaints about difficulties that people with disabilities sometimes have getting on their bus, especially during peak period, because like downtown, for example, the buses line up and take off so quickly. Obviously, there's a desire to keep traffic flowing, and rightly so. However, if the bus unloading and loading within these fare-paid zones that are envisioned is to take place even faster, stop and take off as soon as possible, are there measures that OC Transport will be taken to address the needs of those with disabilities who may have mobility issues that make chasing down a bus difficult?
Madam Chair, I would say that if there's a negative experience right now that anyone has in finding a bus, as the buses go through the busy stations downtown, that experience gets reduced with the design of the Confederation Line stations, where individual stops are assigned to individual groups of routes. So people who are using a mobility device wouldn't need to travel so far as they might today downtown at busy times. Our operators will always wait for all customers who are coming to the platform to board, just as they do now, and our methods in this area won't be greatly different from the methods that are used at stations that are designed in this way all around the world already.
It's really downtown that's the issue, but like looking at on page 7 at the fare paid zone envisaged for Tunney's pasture, so the idea would be to have multiple pick-up and drop-off points within that zone for buses with various routes assigned to each particular stop, similar to how Herdman Station, for example, is now?
Madam Chair, yes, exactly like Herdman Station is designed now, except even more customized. There'll be fewer routes at more stops. The stops won't be quite as long. There's not the flow of buses that can be used by people traveling to as many destinations as there is today, because we don't have routes like 95, 96, 97, 98. We have routes that are much more customized to the part of Barrhaven, Canada, Orleans, or Greenboro or Blossom Park that they're going to. So each of those routes at the 3 main stations will have their own, not their own individual bus stop, but a group of routes will be at one bus stop. So if you're going on routes A, B, C, and D, you'd be at that stop. If you're going to E, F, G, and H, you'd be at that stop. And so that will be a little more. Now, there's still some travel time to get to these stops, especially at these 3 stations, which are very, very big. But that experience that customers have right now of not knowing at all in what order the buses are coming up to their stop, let's say at Bank and Albert, you don't know if it's a Barrhaven bus or a Canada bus that's coming to you first, and you don't know whether it's your neighborhood or someone else's neighborhood coming first. You have that first level or two of knowledge that you don't have today at the busy terminal stations.
Thank you very much. I think that's good news and reassuring. I'm still a bit concerned about the projected, I'm looking at page 5, 170 buses per hour at major transfer stations. I know OC Transpo says the fare control strategy will provide a smooth connection for the 9,000 customers an hour transferring to and from these buses. Is OC Transpo absolutely confident that the space allotted for bus embarkation and disembarkation at these locations is sufficient to avoid long queues of buses waiting to get in to let passengers off?
Madam Chair, yes, we are. As we designed as we cooperated with the Rail Implementation Office in setting the specs to design the Confederation Line, we used best practices from all over the world, best practices specifically from locations that have busy stations like that. And on this point, I encourage anyone who's visiting Toronto at any point, go and see a rush hour at Finch Station, at Down Street Station, at Lawrence Station, at Eglinton Station, and go and see how massive numbers of people are handled very, very quickly through a cooperation between those customers and the operators.
Right. I appreciate Mr. Scrimger's answers and the great work of his team. I know a lot of work went into this very comprehensive report, so thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Seeing no further questions, I too just wanted to say thank you to you, Mr. Scrimger, and your team. I know there was a lot of research that went into this and a lot of thought that went into the proper fare strategy for Ottawa going forward, especially with the implementation of LRT. These are big decisions that will affect us for a long time, and I do think you got it right. I think this is the proper approach to a fare strategy for Ottawa. I know you've borrowed from some of the best practices from other municipalities, and I think this will serve us well. So thank you very much for your work. Carried on the report? Carried. Turning then to item number 6, detours during Confederation line construction. And Mr. Scrimgeour, I think it's back over to you.
Madam Chair, just before I turn it over to Mr. Scrimgeour, I have Nancy Shepherds is here, Deputy City Manager, to talk about this file. One of the things I wanted to make clear is that our role at OC Transpo is to put the service onto the detours that have been brought forward, and I just asked Ms. Shepherds to make a few comments before we turn it over to Mr. Scrimgeour for this servicing aspect.
Thank you, Mr. Manconi, Commissioners, Madam Chair. Just to give you a brief outline in terms of the procurement process that we're following with the Confederation line, and I believe that Mr. O'Connor sent a memo around to all of you, which I've seen, that speaks to the process and the direction that has been given to us by Council with respect to the physical design of the detours. The decision was really clear in the December decision from Council that we will be using Scott Street, and we are now in the design build process, in the process of designing that detour on Scott Street. So I just want to be clear that in terms of that process, the design, the decision's been made with Scott Street. The actual design of it, we've got a lot of input from the community. We will be fine-tuning it. The report that's in front of you today is very, very much in keeping with the mandate of the Transit Commission, which is the service that's going to be put on those detours, and it is limited to that, and I think Mr. Manconi will certainly speak to that, and I'm certainly able to answer some questions for clarification if needed.
Okay, so over to you, Mr. Scrimgeour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Push the brake button here. There we go. So to start at the high level, the background of why we are talking to you about transit service detours during the Confederation Line construction. The construction of the Confederation Line does require closure of sections of the transitway for conversion to light rail. Those sections physically need to be closed, and the bus service has to be taken off those sections in order that the railway line can be built. As has been approved as part of the whole project, the bus service normally on the transitway needs to move to parallel corridors. As I say, this is an integral and inevitable part of the Confederation Line project. And the Confederation Line project includes the construction of those parallel corridors for transit service. So some of the major milestones affecting transit service and transitway service in particular over the next 5 years. In June 2013, the transitway was closed at Nicholas and Laurier, and we moved all of our bus service to a new alignment. Through 2014, all of the construction on the parallel corridors continues. And then I'll say more about these next 5 coming up in the next few slides. But in June 2015, we see Booth Street closing at LeBreton Station. In October 2015, the transitway closing between Herdman and Blair. In February 2016, the transitway closing between Merton and LeBreton. Merton is a point about halfway between Tunney's Pasture and LeBreton or Bayview. May 2016, the transitway closes between Laurier and Herdman. June 2016, the transitway closes between Tunney's Pasture and Merton. And then there's about a 2-year period, a little less than 2 years, where all of those sections remain closed until the Confederation Line opens. So as each section of the transitway closes, there is an impact on customers. The bus service has to come off that section of the transitway and move to the parallel corridor, which will make customers' travel times longer. Our service standards stay the same. The levels of frequency, the levels of occupancy or crowdedness in the bus stay the same. And as some stations close, some of the key stations where a lot of transfers are made, the points where people make connections between bus routes needs to move to another station. There are impacts also on our operations. The longer travel time for buses along the parallel corridors has higher operating costs to provide the same capacity for customers. We need more buses and more staff. So we show here an example of how that works. If you had a bus route that took 30 minutes to complete, and you need to run a bus every 5 minutes on that route, you need to have 6 buses. 6 times 5 equals 30. If that same route that takes 35 minutes to complete and you still need to provide 5-minute service, you need 7 buses. 5 times 7 equals 35. So to provide the same capacity for customers, the same capacity to move people, we have higher operating costs and a longer travel time. You need 1 more bus, and you need 1 more person to drive that bus, and you need more resources to maintain the bus. So those lead into the impacts on costs. We need to own more buses. We need to buy or lease more buses in addition to the current fleet to allow for this longer travel time on the parallel detours. We need more operating staff, we need more maintenance staff, and we will burn more fuel and spend many of our other support costs. All of these impacts have been accommodated in the Confederation Line work so far. The bidders on the light rail contract were given very strong financial incentives to minimize the impact on transit service, to keep the duration of closures as short as possible. In addition, Council approved the expansion of the O-Train service to provide additional north-south capacity that relieves north-south capacity that's currently provided on the transitway through Herdman up to Campus Station. And Council has approved $74 million in funding for these additional costs. $63 million were approved as part of the Confederation Line approval in December 2012, and another $11 million specifically for the acquisition of buses was just approved recently in the 2014 capital budget. So at OC Transpo, we needed to plan the service and plan the operations. And we couldn't begin that until after there was a bidder selected, because each of the bidders was able to propose a different construction plan with different phasing and different durations and different adaptations and details for how those detours were going to work. Once RTG was selected to build the Confederation Line, we began to plan the service arrangements under their construction plan. And we've engaged with them through the Rail Implementation Office in asking questions about that. We developed the bus route plans and the connection point options, and we're trying to find the balance between keeping customer inconvenience as low as possible and to minimize the additional operating costs. So to go through the major points of change over the next few years. First of all, the transitway realignment at Laurier has been in operation since June 2013. It added 1 to 2 minutes to all customers' travel time. We put 2 minutes more into the schedule of all the trips that passed through that point, but we didn't change any bus routes. All the connection points, all the route numbers and where they go are all the same as today. And there's a map which appears better on the right-hand screen than on the left-hand. The next one coming up is the closure of Booth Street, where Booth Street will be closed at LeBreton Station to allow construction of the new Booth Street overpass going over the future Pimisi Station. All of the Booth Street traffic is moved to a temporary extension of Preston up to Wellington, where it turns into the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway. And the customers who now transfer at LeBreton Station will make their transfers instead at the new intersection of the transitway with the Preston extension. So here's a map of how that would look at a schematic transit route map level. The orange dotted section of Booth Street is the section that will be closed, and the dark line, the gray line, shows how our bus routes like 105 and 8, our primary interprovincial bus routes across the Chaudière Bridge, would move to the Preston Street extension rather than at Booth Street, and how the function of LeBreton Station moves over to that intersection. The next one after that, the first major transitway closure, is the closure of the section between Herdman and Blair and all the stations in that section. And that currently forecast to come in October 2015. Most bus routes will move to the new bus lanes on Highway 417 and on the 174 that are now under construction. Some bus routes will move over to Tremblay Road so that we can maintain bus service to Ottawa Station for via rail service and to the businesses around that area. Also, the customers who now use Searville Station will need to walk to nearby bus stops on the parallel bus routes that aren't, because there's no station on the highway. So on this map, I'll point on the right one here. The blue line shows the primary transitway service remaining on the transitway from downtown through Herdman and down to the south, but operating on the 417 between Blair and Herdman, but still going into Herdman Station to get into downtown. The purple line here shows that we can run some service that bypasses Herdman Station in order to provide faster service in from Orleans. So customers who are transferring to go south or who are going to a destination such as the University of Ottawa would need to get on one of the blue routes. People who are going straight to downtown would be able to transfer or would be able to just get there more quickly on one of the routes shown in purple. And you can also see here at Searville Station how there will be nearby service just to the north at Searville and LaBelle and just to the south at Searville and I guess that's Startop. On the west side of downtown, the first major closure of the transitway is the section between Merton and LeBreton, currently scheduled for Confederation line purposes as being in February 2016. The bus routes would then move over to the new bus lanes on Scott Street and Albert Street to be constructed by RTG. No bus route changes as part of this. All of our service would remain the same. All of the connections would be maintained, except, of course, that some of the connections at LeBreton Station would happen at a different physical location. There is still between the Rail Implementation Office and RTG a discussion of moving the date of this possibly earlier to allow for some of the other work that RTG is contracted to provide, such as the combined sewer storage tunnel, CSST. And here's a view of how that will look for transit customers. The bus service coming in from the west, again I'm on the right screen here, comes in through Tunney's Pasture, cuts out onto Scott Street at Merton, and continues in picking up Albert and Slater where it does now. A section of the transitway between Empress and Merton would be closed for conversion to light rail, and at that point the function of LeBreton Station moves to the corner of Preston and Albert, so people coming from the west can transfer to go to the north. Then coming up in also in the spring of 2016, and this is scheduled for May 2016, the section of transitway between Laurier and Herdman. This is the transitway closure that will have the greatest effect on transit customers. Most bus routes will move over onto Nicholas, where there's a number of priority measures to ensure that buses are given a preference over auto traffic. Some bus routes we will move over to King Edward so that we can maintain service to the University of Ottawa and nearby locations. The bus routes that are coming out of downtown and going to the south, to Billings Bridge, South Keys, Riverside South, and the airport, will continue to serve Herdman Station. But the buses that are going to the east, to places like Blair and Orleans, will bypass Herdman Station. And so the connections between east and south have to be done at a different location. And one of those is that connections from the east to Carleton University would be relocated to Saint Laurent Station. And so this map shows that also. The primary thing here is showing that this section of transitway is at that point closed, and that we'd be running some of our transitway service on Nicholas and some on King Edward and Lees to provide connections, maintain a good service to the University of Ottawa. The next section after that to close is Tunney's Pasture to Merton on the west side. The bus routes would move to the new bus lanes on Scott Street to be constructed by RTG. We would not change our bus routes. All the connections would be maintained. And another nuance is that by this time, Booth Street may be reopened for north-south traffic as RTG needs to build the railway line across where that temporary Preston Street extension would be. So around that time, Booth would reopen, and LeBreton Station can then move closer back to where it is at Booth Street and Albert. So the function of LeBreton Station goes from here over to here, down to here, and back to here. But the buses will always be there. The platforms are specified to be appropriate, and RTG will ensure that they are. So once those detours are in place, except for Booth Street, which reopens, those continue until 2018. It's important to know, important to remind ourselves that as each section of the transitway closes, it never reopens for buses. It's being built as a light rail line, and it can't reopen until the whole light rail line is open for business. The next set of route changes that affect customers come after this when the Confederation line opens, and that's when central parts of the transitway and express routes are replaced by train service, and the express and local routes are adjusted to feed into the Confederation line stations. So from this route planning that we did on the basis of the detour planning, we needed to plan our operating requirements. As I said earlier, we need additional buses, staff, and other costs. And as I said earlier, Council has approved $74 million in funding. We have 22 buses available within the current fleet. These are buses that we held on to during the double-decker replacement project. We knew we needed more buses coming up, so rather than retiring those buses last year or earlier this year, they're still in our fleet, and they're available to start this process. In fact, we're using 7 of those buses right now to support the Laurier realignment. But we need more buses, and we need to initiate that bus acquisition very early in 2014 because of the long lead time to manufacture and deliver buses. We needed to answer 2 questions. What type of buses should we acquire, and how should we acquire them? So first of all, if we needed to buy buses, we need a certain amount of capacity. And if we use buses that are the same as the buses that are in our fleet now, though there's newer models of some, in general terms, we'd need about 78 new 40-foot buses, or 52 new articulated buses, or 39 new double-decker buses. The higher capacity buses provide more capacity, and therefore we wouldn't need so many of them. Our conclusion at this point is go for the higher capacity buses. The capital and operating cost of the 40-foot buses would be very, very high over this construction period. So both articulated and double-decker buses have lower capital costs for a fleet and lower operating costs than 40-foot buses do. Now, this is not per individual bus, but to move that number of customers. And our current experience is the double-decker buses, the ones we have in our fleet now, have the lowest costs per customer, both capital and operating. We also needed to look at bus acquisition options, so we wanted to investigate leasing. We did that by sending an RFI out to the bus suppliers in the industry, and we got quite a uniform answer from the different replies that we got, which indicated that for a 3-year lease, or about 20% of the useful life of a bus, we would have to pay about 75% of the purchase price. So leasing buses for transit is not a very big part of the transit market and would be very expensive for us to go into it. The other option we looked at is purchasing buses as an early replacement for life-expired buses that we would be replacing anyway in a future year. We've got a fleet of buses which are coming up. They were purchased in 2001 up to 2003. They will need to be replaced in 2019 to 2021 anyway. If we buy buses in 2015 to 2016 for the detours, we can use those buses to increase the fleet size, and then once the Confederation line opens, we can retire that capacity in the 2001 buses and retire them on schedule. And so our conclusions were that leasing was unaffordable and that we recommended the early replacement option, and that does fit into the transit affordability plan. So our strategy on bus acquisition is to go to the market to make sure we have current, up-to-date pricing, to issue an RFP for the purchase of high-capacity buses in early 2014. We will make sure that bidders know that our decision will be made not on the capital cost per bus and not on the capital cost for the fleet, but on our all-in capital and operating costs over this construction period. That will give us solid market-tested capital costs, and it gives us the potential to have those capital costs be lower because of the competition between vendors. We will make sure that these buses do meet the current standards. That means security cameras and digital video recorders on buses. We are going to look very closely at how to operate Wi-Fi equipment on our buses, and we're going to install automatic passenger counters on all buses as well. Those costs, we have to manage our costs over time. We've assumed our costs in a very cautious way. We've assumed very high reliability of the new buses. We're using cautious estimates, neither too pessimistic nor too optimistic on the extra travel time to go around these detours. And we're basing all of our capacity calculations on the same standards as the rest of the system. But the operating costs may be different when we actually get to this point than what we're calculating right now. The details of the detours, the details of the traffic management are still being worked out between the Rail Implementation Office and RTG. Now, they're bound to the promises they made in their bid, but the details still continue to be discussed. So the actual travel time might be a little different when the detours are in place. It's also possible that the actual transit ridership during those years might be higher than it is today, specifically because of the longer travel time that motorists will be experiencing through this construction period. More people might choose to use transit. And the other thing that we're watching is that we've got a number of programs now to improve the reliability of our current bus fleet, and once those are completed, we could have higher bus fleet availability from our current fleet than we have now. So that might make a few more buses available. But we will manage and adjust everything on this list to meet and work within the $74 million that are available. We have to develop a customer information strategy. Customers will have to expect and learn how they're to travel during this modified operation through these years. So we have to develop a strategy that helps customers adapt to relocated station platforms, relocated points where they make their connections, that there is longer travel times, but that all of this benefit is for, all of this inconvenience is for the very strong benefit that comes when the Confederation line opens. So this customer information strategy will be ready before the first major section of Transitway closes in 2015. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Scrimgeour. There is one public delegation, so we'll call that person now. It's Cheryl Perot. Good afternoon, Ms. Perot. You have 5 minutes to address the Commission. Go ahead.
Thank you. I will speak about bus acquisitions on the agenda item, which is called detours during the Confederation line. And thanks to the solicitor for the clarification, and to Mark Johnson for all the very many emails he sent out to the community telling us not to come. And clearly you don't want to engage the community on something we knew nothing about and weren't smart enough to pick up, but now thanks to the solicitor we have the date and the page number for the council decision that we didn't realize had been made.
Okay, Ms. Perot, I think it's been made very clear that this is, the item on the agenda today is about bus acquisitions as a result of detours they're putting into effect. The decision was made on the detours back on December 19th in 2012. It was committee of the whole, and the public had the opportunity to address that at that time. So if you could just keep your comments specific to the bus acquisition strategy related to detours, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, I will. Thank you. So we believe that you wouldn't have to buy all the extra buses that you're talking about here if you would talk to Rail Implementation, RTG, and FEDCO or whoever about a better solution for putting 2,400 buses on Scott Street.
The solution,
we think it's going to slow it down.
The decision was made in 2012. The Transit Commission does not have the authority to revisit a decision of council. So this is not the forum to discuss revisiting a council decision. So I have to rule you out of order on that point. You're welcome to speak about the bus acquisition strategy related to detours.
Right, and you talked about the number of buses, and it looks like it's about 74 million. You say the travel times might be different, and we really think they will be. Expecting that 2,400 buses won't be slowed down on Scott Street is a little hard to believe. So we think you need to really revisit all of this, and you could save money and not have to buy the number of buses that this report is recommending. So that's really my comments, is we really do think that you need to do that because you'd save some money on gas.
One more time, we do not have the authority as the Transit Commission to revisit a decision of council that was taken a year ago. There is no authority for this commission to do that.
But we believe you could do some transfers and not have to put all the buses there. And that would save you the money and the gas and the buses. If you transferred at Tunney Station and filled up the half-empty buses that will be going along that route. So we do believe that you could look at that, and I believe that would be within your purview. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Oh, there are some. Commissioner Blowis. To the delegation. Is anyone on this list a question to the delegation? No? Thank you very much, Ms. Perot. Okay. Questions to staff? Commissioner Blowis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start off by saying, Mr. Scrimgeour, I do appreciate a very detailed overview you gave us here, and I know it's a tricky balancing act, and you've been very clear with us from the beginning that for every minute of delay that there's a cost involved, an operating cost, and I think you gave us a heads up when the transitway was being closed here at Laurier, and I must admit I was a little skeptical, yet I'm surprised how well it's working. I think you've probably minimized the delays and the cost far more than most of us would have expected. So there's a very sort of optimistic outlook there in terms of how this whole transition is going to be managed. What I am trying to understand, though, is the right sizing of the fleet and the recommendation in terms of acquiring new buses, because I think in a previous presentation it was explained to us how there was going to be this, let's say, a major hump in the number of vehicles we needed and the number of operators we needed, and then once the Confederation line's in operation, that would drop off significantly, and that's where we're going to achieve our operational savings. So in terms of this temporary, whatever you want to call it, why would we not be looking at refurbished buses to get us through that 3-4 year period?
Madam Chair, as it turns out, where we are right now, we don't have any buses that are due to be retired before that point. So if we had buses that we were going to be retiring in 2015, then one of the options might be to put some money into those and extend them to have 3 more years of useful life. We hung on to the buses that were replaced by the double-deckers, to the ones that are still of decent capacity, the relatively modern low-floor 40-foot buses. But we retired, as part of the double-decker, the very oldest, very first-generation low-floor buses, which had a very small capacity and weren't able of stepping into this role to provide transitway service. And it was not, even if they had, it wasn't realistic to extend their life by that many years, and even if it had been, they wouldn't have provided the capacity that's needed, so the operating cost would have been very, very high. So it's an advancement of purchases that we would be making anyway in 2019 to 21, advancing that by a few years, buying those buses a little bit early as a way of getting the overlap to build up the fleet size. And then the buses that are normally retired in 2019 to 2021 do get retired on schedule, but at that moment we don't need to buy quite so many buses to replace them because we will have bought them a few years earlier.
And I know you told us there are a number of ifs and variables, but I'm trying to understand, are you telling us the numbers would work out just perfectly, that let's say the increase in the fleet to get us over this hump would then drop off and have us back at let's say the median age that we want in our fleet? I mean, it's almost like good fortune that we've made the fleet so new that we wouldn't need to acquire, or we wouldn't have buses going into retirement, thus forcing us might not be the right word, but leading us to picking up new buses to get us through this. It's like the numbers almost seem to fit too perfectly.
Madam Chair, they're not perfect, but they're very close. And Mona Monkman, who's with the finance team, who's done all the modeling on the affordability, was integral in helping us model that out. So we modeled out the refurb years and so forth and where we are with the fleet, and we landed on this strategy. So it comes very, very close. We're off a little bit, but it's a bit of luck and a bit of strategy. I'd like to put it that way, but it fits quite nicely with that.
Okay. I have a couple of photos. I hope we can get them on the screen because I want to understand the operational impacts and the cost impacts. And I know the city solicitor may think this is dealing with something we've already dealt with before, but this really does lead to questions about how. Are you able to get the other picture up too at this? So this is an example. This is even prior to any construction starting on the Nicholas ramp, and this is the ramp. My understanding is it's going to be used ultimately to get us through from when the transitway starts closing and parts around Herdman close. This is what's going to get us onto the 417 and get us east. And if you go back to the other picture for a second, here's an example of, and this is, by the way, this is before we close the lane, which is being reconstructed, which will be reopened, I think, to give priority to buses. But you can see already, this lineup with an ambulance in the middle basically extends. And this is not unusual. This is not like a one-off where I was hovering for days and days waiting for this scene. This is actually a very usual experience here. So this ambulance probably took 20 minutes to make it around the turn with signals, flashing lights, sirens on, and everything else. What kind of an impact are you going to, first of all, how many buses are you going to be running through on this ramp when the transitway gets closed down? Just a ballpark figure, just to...
Madam Chair, the number of buses going around that ramp would be, a ballpark figure would be hundreds per hour. Right now we run approximately 180 buses an hour out of downtown in the afternoon rush hour, and the majority of them would go that way. So more than 2 buses a minute.
Just want to remind you, Commissioner, that this is on bus acquisition.
Yes, and I need to know what the operational impacts are to understand what the bus acquisitions would be for that stage of construction. And this is something we tried to deal with before. It didn't get that far, but I think without seeing what's in front of us here and seeing that, like this, seeing what really happens there, and to say we're going to throw a couple hundred more buses an hour into that mix when there is really no additional capacity. So my next question is, so what is the operational cost of having those buses sitting there at peak hour on that ramp? What are we looking at cost per hour? Because you're actually very good, very accurate in terms of giving us almost a breakdown by the minute, and that's why I'm so appreciative of how well Laurier is working, and I'm hopeful that we can do something here. I just don't see it.
Madam Chair, so on the traffic management, there are proposed a lot of traffic management strategies to give the buses priority, and it's the people in the Rail Implementation Office. We're providing input to that, and they're feeding those requirements to RTG to design.
So
there is a plan which we can get in more detail of how those buses will be given the jump ahead of the cars. On the additional travel time, we haven't broken it down at this additional section, but the additional travel time, it could take up to 8 more minutes for people to get to Orleans than it does today once we have to go on the parallel corridors. And on the cost, this is, each of those minutes is a cost. I don't have it broken down to that way that the Commissioner is describing, but it's the extra travel time to provide the same capacity of service for customers that adds up to the capital and operating costs which Council has approved.
Yeah, and which is exactly my point. The longer the buses sit on here, and even with priority, so let me ask you, is the priority to take one lane? What you see there right now are 2 lanes. Is it to take one of those lanes and convert it over to completely to bus priority during peak hours? Is that what the plan is?
Madam Chair, it would be the traffic staff from the Rail Implementation Office who would describe that in the best detail. It's
well, maybe Ms. Shepherd, sorry, Pat, to jump in. Maybe Ms. Shepherd can answer this, because this came up before, and if we've underestimated what we're doing, the cost, first of all, the $70 million isn't going to go very far if our whole eastbound fleet is sitting on the ramp. So, Ms. Shepherd, we had the opportunity previously to try and deal with this, and I think the answer was we think we can manage to get the fleet through this bottleneck. I'm trying to understand how and whether what we have before us is sufficient to cope with that.
Madam Chair, if I might, there's 2 aspects to this. One of them is the physical design and the lane allocation, and Mr. Scripture has spoke to that in terms of priority for buses. We can certainly sit down with you offline. I think it's very interesting for you to see exactly how that would be proposed to be done in terms of the lane assignments for buses. Not unlike how we managed the Laurier-Nicholas intersection, we're working very closely with OC Transpo to fine-tune designs. The other aspect I will just raise is that a big part of trying to give free flow to the buses and priority to the buses is to make sure that we eliminate some of the weaves that occur through there. So the Lee's on-ramp is closed. As you know, the ramp from the 417 going eastbound on 174 will also be closed. So there's part of it is some closures to eliminate that conflict that can exist, and certainly when we have the details of the physical lane assignments, I'm sure that we can work with Mr. Scrimgeour and sit down with any commission members who will like to see that.
Well, I think we're underestimating what the impact is going to be here and what the operational cost is going to be, but we won't know that till we get there, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a real simple question. During this whole process and trying to figure out how many buses, et cetera, have you consulted with the post-secondary education institutes? I'm thinking specifically Le Cité that makes use of like Steerville Station quite a bit. This whole new route, I'm curious if it's going to affect the number of buses they require.
Mr. Chair, our discussions with post-secondary universities have mostly been with the University of Ottawa because it's the closure of Lee's Station and Campus Station that will have the greatest effect on their locations. La Cité Collégiale service runs out of Blair Station, and they're not really within walking distance of Steerville Station. I imagine that some people might use that. But their primary service, the Route 129, runs out of Blair Station, and its connections into this network will need to be different, especially in the later phase when the connections aren't so valuable at Herdman. So we have to relocate their transfer function as the modified network continues, and we'll be talking to them as well as anyone else who represents large groups of customers through that customer information strategy that we talked about.
Okay, great. So I take that as you will be speaking with them? Or you have spoken with them? Le Cité specifically?
Specifically, we will be speaking with La Cité Collégiale and many, many others about this plan.
I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Tierney. Commissioner Crew, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try and be as brief as I can. For Mr. Manconi or Mr. Scrimgeour, I trust that what we're doing today is simply approving for you to go out and do the things that are noted on slide 24 to issue the RFP. We are not today delegating to staff the decision to actually go out and purchase anything. Is that correct?
No, Adam. Actually, Mr. Acting Chair, this is just an information report. We have all the authority and the approvals through budget and through the approval of the original Confederation line budget and process. This is an information item. We're being proactive and providing you additional information. So it's we're proceeding with it, and we're just providing Commission with an info report.
So do you anticipate that you will be coming back to this group or its successor with a specific proposal, or will you be operating under delegated authority from this point on, assuming that we approve the report today?
With a design-build process, you need to meet critical timelines, otherwise penalties kick in. So we will be proceeding, and we can do, as I've said repeatedly, information updates through my GM updates or the chair's updates, but we need to proceed with the acquisition of these vehicles.
And being very sensitive to the issue, I recognize that one of the things that this report does suggest is that it may be, it's not precluding the result, and I certainly have no knowledge about what that result is going to be, that the solution may be double-decker buses. We are currently awaiting a report involving the double-decker buses from the Transportation Safety Board. I trust that if the recommendation of staff is, and again, I have no knowledge, of course, what that Transportation Safety Board report is going to say, that if the recommendation of staff and staff goes ahead with the purchase of double-decker buses, that it could, the decision would be weighted at least until we, or could wait until we get what the results of that that Transportation Safety Board report is, perhaps showing that there was no mechanical problem with the double-deckers that we have.
The way we would handle any TSB findings is that we will build into the contract any requirement to meet any orders, whether it's TSB or any other approval agency. And the analogy I bring, not to diminish it at all, but if there was a recall or an engineering adjustment that needed to be made, it would be required to our vendors to do that. That's standard practice. We're going to emphasize that even more in this. Mr. Byrne and our legal department has been involved in that dialogue, so we'll have the appropriate clause in the event that there's anything coming from the TSB, that it will go through the normal process to ensure that we comply.
Right. So the answer is that if the recommendation were double-decker buses from the same vendor that we purchased the previous ones, that it would be built into the contract that they would need to consider any finding of the Transportation Safety Board and comply with any such order.
That's correct.
Okay. And then finally for Mr. Scrimgeour, I trust that just because we're requiring these buses for this purpose doesn't mean that they are restricted to the purpose of necessarily working on these routes. As new, more modern buses, they may be more fuel efficient. Certainly in keeping with our previous decision, they'll be outfitted with cameras. I guess they could be used anywhere in the system if that was most efficient, so that there could be, randomly now buses with cameras anywhere in the system.
Mr. Chair, yes, the buses that we buy are to expand the capacity of the fleet. All of the buses in the fleet are circulating over the entire network, and most buses in our fleet reach all parts of the city every day. So those individual buses that we would acquire are just more buses, and they would circulate through. Depending on what type of bus they are, we might find that they are best suited to certain trips and certain routes. For instance, double-decker buses are used now on the most frequent of the long-distance express routes. Articulated buses, there are other high-capacity choice, are used on trunk routes that have a lot of turnover on them. So we will put the additional capacity where it best fits, but the main thing is to have additional capacity to provide the same additional fleet capacity to provide the same customer capacity with longer travel times.
So you'll be making the decision about how these specific vehicles are deployed in keeping with your regular portfolio, I trust.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Scrimgeour.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Chair. I wonder if Ms. Shepherds could come to the table for a minute, please. You just made a statement, Ms. Shepherds, about the 2012 report that came to Council recommending that Scott and Albert be the streets used for all the buses coming from the west. Was that the report where there was one line on page 41 of an 80-page report that stated that?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the report in front of me. It was clearly a decision in that report as outlined in Rick O'Connor's memo to you. There were public showcases held, and I recall discussions specifically around Scott Street at those open houses that were held in the lead up to the decision by Council. So it was certainly out there, and public certainly commented on it at that time.
Well, Ms. Shepherds, when it's buried in the report and it's not made clear in the recommendations, it's pretty hard for the public to get the information. The 2010 report, Ms. Shepherds, that talked about ameliorating Albert and Scott Streets, using the parkway, trying to
Councillor Holmes, I'd like to certainly welcome you to the Transit Commission meeting today, but I have to tell you, like I've told all the other speakers, that this report is about detours. We do not have any jurisdiction over the Scott Street issue, so I would ask you to keep your comments to the detour issue as it affects the bus acquisition issue as it's affected by detours.
That sounds like another stealth matter, Madam Chair, because the
name
of the report is detours during Confederation Line construction.
Well, it may not be the best name for the report, but the report is about bus acquisition strategy related to the detours. It's not about detours themselves. That decision, as you know, was taken by Council in December 2012.
Perhaps Mr. O'Connor could have changed the name of the report in that case and made it clearer as to what the public might want to come and talk about. So my question is about the $74 million, Madam Chair. Can somebody tell me whether that $74 million precludes any other thing other than Scott and Albert being used for the detour? Does it still allow some possibility to use the parkway for some of those buses, or does that amount prevent any further look at the problems?
Yes, Madam Chair, it does allow us to look at other things, and Mr. Scrumger, who was at the public meeting, did commit to look at whether there's opportunities to reduce the volume on Scott Street. We will manage expectations. I'm not going to say it's hundreds of buses that he can look at, but as part of his work, he will look to see if, for example, we can deadhead on the parkway or we can eliminate, and every little bit helps. And we all know how Mr. Scrumger works. He will do his best to do that. But no, yes, we can. Yes, we can look at other alternatives, but the detour is on Scott Street, and we'll do the work that we committed to at the meeting.
And just to be clear, that information will come back to the Transportation Committee, right?
The Rail Implementation Office is bringing a report back on Scott Street in terms of the detailed design. We can certainly roll that into that.
That's going to the Transportation Committee?
Madam Chair, there's a requirement to report back on the safety analysis that has been done, but in terms of reporting back, I expect we can give an update in terms of where we land with respect to the routing of buses.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the comments from staff that they can look at other things. There needs to be some public statements about the problems that are going to come from Scott and Albert. The amount of buses, the air quality problems, access problems, and we need to be looking at that, and I appreciate that there will be some time spent on those problems.
Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. Is that it? Yeah. Anyone else on this report, received on the report? Thank you. So on to item number 7, the request for data about off-peak punctuality of specific OC Transpo routes. Commissioner Johnson.
Well, Madam Chair, is the idea for me to reread the motion?
Well, this is your report. Do you want to just go to a vote, or did you have anything you wanted to say?
Well, I will make a short statement. I believe I fully covered the rationale for this in the discussion section of the report. Since the time of writing, my efforts to reach a compromise on it have been unsuccessful, as reducing the scope of the motion did not reduce significantly the work required to put together the framework in order to develop these data. My understanding is that it would require several days of work for a full-time equivalent. But fortunately, the motion was worded to allow OC Transpo flexibility in producing this data, and that they had the option as to whether to limit the hours or routes covered. So the door is left open to producing a more global report, which of course would be ideal. There's also no timeline given on this response, giving OC Transpo additional flexibility. I still believe this is a necessary move, and I would remind my fellow commissioners that approving this motion is only a first step. It will simply require OC Transpo to produce a white paper on what change to the work plan would be required to produce the requested data. At this stage, we would then be in a fully informed position as to decide as a commission whether to move forward or not. Should we move forward at that point, the approval of council would then be required, as I understand it. So I'd recommend we at least look at our options here, and this is exactly what the white paper would do. Let's at least take this step, given the importance of off-peak data to the Commission as it works to make evidence-based decisions regarding our transit service. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So a comment from you, Mr. Manconi?
Madam Chair, I can tell you that the Commissioner and I spoke again on Friday for a fair bit of time. My suggestion to the Commissioner, and it's open to everyone, is that why doesn't he come and meet with Pat and myself? We will gladly show all of the stock data that's available and provide him with that. The issue we have with this is that this requires setting up another system for Mr. Scrumger to manage, and it may be well worth data, but in the meantime, if it's, as we've noted in our comments, we can throw this into the hopper for the revised scorecard in 2015. So perhaps there's some data that's available that interests the Commissioner. I did ask, I've been around scorecards my entire career. You need to know what you're going to do with this data. So I looked to the Commission as to once this data is produced, what are we going to do with it? What levers are you going to push and pull to improve service? And I remind everyone that we have the revised performance scorecard that Commissioner Brown asked about that is delayed, that we're bringing in 2015. So in our sit-down with Commissioner Johnson, we can certainly share with him what's available, but it does require setting up another system that we will need to design and then implement. And I'm also interested in why these routes and why not other routes throughout the system.
So just to be clear, you're telling the Transit Commission that you cannot do this work in 2014?
No, we cannot, Madam Chair. We're behind on our work plan, as I mentioned in the previous meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Is that it, Commissioner Johnson? Yeah. Commissioner Kadri.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Manconi, just coming back to the comments you made regarding setting up another system and trying to work with that, can you, with the timelines that are, or not timelines, with the items that are identified in this request, could you just feed us as to what kind of cost are we looking at in terms of doing this study or data?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's not the cost I'm concerned about, it's the staff time. Mr. Scrimger estimates it could be up to a week to get his staff to do it. Then he needs to review it and I need to review it. We want good quality data that comes before you, and then we'll need to manage it from that point on.
And you said that very clearly at the last meeting when this motion was going forward as a motion to be discussed at the last commissioners' meeting. And you had stated very clearly upon a question that would you have time for this, as Chair Dean just asked, for 2014, and you said, no, you do not have the time for that in 2014. Having said that, Madam Chair, this afternoon, I don't understand what was not very clear at that time. To me, that message was very loud and clear in terms of Mr. Manconi and his staff's work. And today, again, he's putting that card on the table, suggesting that the report, although in Commissioner Johnson's mind may be an important report, it may have a time and a place in the future, but not at the present time. And what I would suggest, Madam Chair, is that we call a vote on this motion and go for yea and nay vote on this motion, and let's clarify this situation once and for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Kadri. Commissioner Wilkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think with what's going on now, getting this data might be fine for right now, but with all the detours we have with the construction, all the things that are going to be happening, it's going to be out of date as soon as we receive it, which means it's really a waste of time and effort at this point in time. And I understand it's almost an operational issue as opposed to but although I understand that what you're really trying to do is get some background data to find out about our own time, but the timings, something like this is much better done once we get the light rail system going, when we can see how it's going to work on it. Because this week it's going to be this timing, and next week it's next timing. And any of us and councillors know from the comments we get from the public that there are days when you get everything held up, and then something gets fixed because a job is finished somewhere, and then the next week it's a different route that gets into some sort of problems. And so I really think it's going to be work done that isn't going to be effective. And I don't see at this point an important enough purpose for it to go ahead with it. So I would suggest that we defeat this at this particular point in time, but in a few years, once things are more established, and we can also, staff are working all the time and trying to get us better data, and I'd rather leave it to them to bring in better data as they can do it using more of the existing systems and collection that we already have in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilkinson. Commissioner Crew.
Very quickly, Madam Chair, I'm sure Mr. Scrimger will be in the best position to answer this question. Do you have any just anecdotal evidence about whether or not on-time and early performance is more or less of an issue at off-peak times than it is at on-peak times?
Madam Chair, no, I don't. I can say that we carry more customers at rush hours than at other times of the day, and that the auto traffic delays that cause unreliability to our service are greater at those times, at rush hours, than at other times. But to draw a comparison between the scheduled time and the actual time is really a question of whether the scheduled time is appropriate, more than what the conditions are for customers. And so reliability is not the same thing as travel time. And we just haven't done that comparison at off-peak times. We've been concentrating our work on the times of day where delays are most common, where unreliability is most common, and where we carry the greatest number of customers and hear from them the greatest concern about reliability.
And it is then your impression that the primary driver behind, I guess, delayed performance is traffic conditions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scrimgeour.
Thank you, Commissioner Crew. Commissioner Johnson.
So, Madam Chair, just to respond to concerns raised by Councillor Wilkinson, I'll emphasize that we will be continuing to receive reports, at least as the template stands now, during the construction period on peak times as well as off-peak times. So in terms of any concerns about off-peak times being skewed by detours, the same would apply to on-peak. Currently, we're only gathering data on punctuality for less than 20% of OC Transpo's total service times. So having the Q1 and Q3 for 2013, as I indicated, would give us a snapshot of how we're doing the other 80% of the time. I feel it's hard to assess our performance when the data we receive is not representative, and of course we need to make evidence-based decisions. And I feel this is a key piece of data that is necessary to indicate how we're serving our riders, not only all riders, not only those who ride during on-peak times. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Seeing no further speakers, Councillor Cadre has called yeas and nays. So, Madam Clerk, yeas and nays.
Commissioner Blais?
No.
Commissioner Blois? Commissioner Eglai?
No.
Commissioner Hobbs?
No.
Commissioner Tierney?
No.
Commissioner Wilkinson?
No.
Commissioner Crew?
No.
Commissioner Farabee? Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Ron?
Yes.
Commissioner Kadri?
No.
And Chair Deans?
No. Motion is defeated. Moving then to inquiries. Are there any inquiries? Seeing none, other business? Adjourn. Thank you.